Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Perspective Philosophy, where we try to better our perceptions of the world through philosophical discussion. So, today's episode is going to be a debate between me and an atheist. I'm an agnostic. I'm arguing that the belief or non belief in God is just as rational as either or, vice versa. So, essentially, if you choose to believe in God or you choose not to believe in God, you are just as rational as if you choose to the alternative. So, yeah, just typical agnostic, really. I also make a point about the knowledge claim about the existence of God, usually within my agnosticism. I don't believe that we can have knowledge of God as he's an infinite or an absolute. Now, it's important to recognize in this debate that the atheist is not saying that God certainly does not exist, but almost certainly does not exist. So he's not requiring some level of logical contradiction in the notion of God or something like that. That would mean that God couldn't exist. So that's important to recognize. Now, I'm going to pop over to Arthuria now. If you don't know what Arthuria is a debate server on Discord. I do a lot of debates through there. You could even challenge me to a debate through there if you want. And they're a great server. They have mods and really nice people to chat to. So definitely check it out. So I'm going to... Actually, I don't know if I've linked them in the description, but I'll do that in a second anyway. I'm going to pop over to Arthuria. Hello. Hey guys. Just let you know I'm live. Just introduce the stream. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastically. What about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, I had some audio issues there, as always, some sort of technical issues. But otherwise, pretty good.
Nice.
Nice. Thanks for coming on, Perspective. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So I just introduced the debate topic-ish to my audience, but obviously a more formal introduction from you two, so that we're definitely on the right, on the same wavelength in terms of how the debate needs to be structured and what we're actually arguing.
Sure, I'll just kind of introduce the prop, then I'll pass it off to Asgrod since he's taking the affirmative. So we do have an official debate happening with Asgrod and Perspective Philosophy. And for this debate, Asgrod's taking the view that the Christian God is almost certainly non-existent, and Perspective Philosophy is going to be taking the opposition. It'll just be a normal back and forth debate, and as always, we'll put a voting poll at the very end of the debate for the audience that was here for at least 75% of the debate to vote on who they think performed better. So Asgrod, since you're taking the affirmative, you just want to open up and give your position, you can go for it.
So I'm arguing that the Christian God almost certainly doesn't exist. So there's a couple things to unpack in there, namely, like, what exactly is the Christian God, and then how do we determine if something is almost certainly non-existent? So I'll talk about the latter first. So when I say that it's almost certainly non-existent, the main question is almost certainly. This is a question of probability. What is the probability of the Christian God existing? And I'm claiming that it's below a certain threshold, and below that threshold, I say that if a proposition has a probability that's below this threshold, then I say it's almost certainly it's almost certainly false. And so the proposition in question here is the Christian God exists, and I'm saying that the probability of that proposition being true is below this threshold. So we could talk a little bit about the threshold. My
Yeah.
starting my starting kind of offer is a probability of 1 in 1,000. I think we'll disagree plenty, even just with that threshold, because it sounds like you're saying it's 50-50,
Yep.
0.5 probability. Um,
Well, actually, I think that it's epistemologically improvable. So I think that the to talk about the existence or non-existence of the divine is fundamentally misguided. Pointless would be the word
right,
I would use.
right. So yeah, like so basically the means that I show is, like, I'm just saying, like, okay, the probability is below this level, and I use a little bit of probability theory to figure out how to assess that. So it's just like we assess the prior probability. I use the uniform prior method, where I say that all of the equally specific alternatives to the hypothesis are equally probable, so that the probability of any given one of them is 1 divided by the number of those alternatives. So first, like we would assess the prior probability, and then we'd use Bayes' theorem to incorporate any evidence for or against the proposition being true. But I'm guessing we're not going to get that far. So why
Well,
don't you
we'll
tell
see.
me,
Yeah,
why do you think it's like kind of, I'm getting the idea that you think like
I think that
the
it's
Christian God is kind of unreachable. So what's that about?
yeah, I would say that it's ontologically distinct from what we can or cannot access in terms of evidentiary claims. I guess the reason I'd say that for is because of the definition of the Christian God. I will agree in that it's what an omnibenevolent, was an omniscient, omnibenevolent, omnipotent creator and sustainer of all things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. If we're taking that definition, I would say that a Christian God is usually seen as necessary, non-contingent, absolute, and goes beyond human faculties in terms of what knowledge claims we can make. I'd say that we can talk about God through analogy or via negativa. I can tell you what isn't God, but I can't tell you what is. The concept of God being, essentially the greatest conceivable being, if we accept that, then I would say that it is non-conceivable, and the only one that could have evidence of God's existence would be God himself.
Okay. I am willing to grant that I can grant that it's impossible to, kind of gain evidence for or against God, but that is not sufficient to negate my argument, because the prior probability can be very low on its own without taking any evidence into account.
Well, I think the issue is that, like, I guess this is the way I look at it. Like, when we look at what is a God in this sense, we're looking at whether God could be the cause of creation, or whether, like, in terms of existence itself. Like, we normally look to God in terms of, like, when for example, something like Aquinas' 5 proofs or something, they try to prove God through, like, the necessary causal sequence of events, like the necessary foundation of a causal sequence of events, or like the Aquinas even goes so far to say it's like the end, of everything, essentially the measure of being and goodness. I guess my point is that we can genuinely hypothesize on first causes, or an infinite regress of causes, but I think that's ontologically distinct from where we exist in terms of what we have access to. We can hypothesize, that's fine, but we can't really make a middle term. There's no way that we can, instantiate our conclusions on that. And so, coming to any, like, probability, like going, like, it is the case that God doesn't exist, or it isn't the case, or it is more or less likely, seems to point that we could gain some sort of evidence for or against the existence of God. Or do you disagree?
It depends on our definition of evidence, but like I would take evidence to be some kind of observation or fact, such that, like, if the fact is true, it lowers the probability of the hypothesis in question being true. So under that definition, yes, it means you cannot gain evidence about that. But me saying probability, me assessing the probability of God does not require evidence to be taken into account in order for me to do so. Like, you could say that me assessing the prior probability of God as being low is a form of evidence. But yeah, I guess my first question is, why do you believe that one cannot gain evidence for or against the Christian God?
I would say that it's more in the terms of when it's with it being defined almost as an absolute, perfect being. I'd say that we can have. It's not to say that, let's say, like if you were to take something like the fine tuning argument or something like that, or the problem of evil, right? Like, both are trying to essentially establish, the the likelihood of the existence of God, like one positive and one negative, essentially. One essentially tries to argue from one of the faculties of God that the existence of God, the existence of God is impossible because God, being all loving, is incompatible with this world. And all of my understanding of the problem of evil is that this has never been instantiated. We've never managed to create an argument which has actually managed to reach a point in which we go like, look, actually, the amount of suffering in this world is absolutely incompatible logically with the existence of an omnibenevolent being. And it can't be explained through any theodicy. And then on the other hand, let's take something like the fine-tuning argument. It's an argument for the probability in terms of what is the first cause, whether it was intelligent design, or whether it was random cause. And the reality is that, it very well might be that the probability of the universe coming around is 1 in, 1 times 10 to the 40 or something, or even higher. But, with an infinite amount of possibilities, it eventually would have to occur. Also, you could look to something like the necessity of being rather than God. You don't have to necessarily make God make it a divine mind. You could just say it actualized itself because it was necessarily possible in a modal sense. And I think that's kind of where I would take it. We can't really say that this universe is anything but possible because it's essentially the foundation for our logic and our reasoning as a whole. Like, existence is indubitable. So when I look towards the plethora of positions for and against God, it seems to me that there can never be, where we look for these evidentiary claims goes beyond the scope of our investigative powers, either intellectually, as in we are trying to reason things which go beyond our faculties because they're perfect and we're not perfect, or contingently. They are necessary and we live in a contingent universe. So on both of those grounds, ontologically, it seems that we cannot gain evidence for or against the existence of a creator who's omnibenevolent, omniscient, and omnipresent. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have a belief state about it. It just means that probabilistically, those belief states are going to be based off, for example, your presuppositional states, your hypothesis, which are going to be ungrounded. They're not going to have any foundation in reality themselves. So I don't know, unless you've got maybe you've got an argument I haven't heard. So maybe present your position, and I'll see if I have my mind blown.
Sure. So I mean, my argument is I haven't even thought about the counter evidence against God. My belief about God being unlikely is purely based on the complexity of the claim. So I can run through a list of various attributes that are considered definitional for the Christian God. I went on Wikipedia real quick. I can
go for it. All right,
there's let me go up in the Wikipedia so I can read what these mean if we have any questions.
I mean,
there's aseity, eternity, goodness, graciousness, holiness, immanence, immutability, the main ones of omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, and omnibenevolence, immutability, incomprehensibility, impeccability, incorporeality, various other attributes that are considered if the God didn't have this attribute, it wouldn't be the Christian God. These things are just kind of foundational to what we consider to be specifically the Christian God. There are plenty of conceptions of gods that don't have these attributes.
Kind of Anthony Flew, isn't it? Where he says, what is it? The God dies the death of 1,000 qualifications.
Yeah, basically, right? So it's all of these claims contribute to assess the prior probability of this. It's 1 divided by 2 to the power of the number of independent claims that make up the definition. So it's if you look at that, it's I have a list of 28 claims here, 28 things that are considered to be integral to the conception of the Christian God. So it's 1 divided by 2 to the power of 28. And that's a big number. That's 200 million. So it's like 1 over 200 million is the probability based on the prior probability. We could take into account evidence, but you've said that there is no way to accrue any sort of evidence for or against the Christian God. So
Yeah, I would say that, and I
so,
think that
so I'm
like
curious,
even
what's
even
your
with
argument against the prior probability assessment?
well, I mean, like in terms of the the coalescence of those. I mean, they're essentially arguing like the likelihood of the coalescence of all of these would be faculties. Would that? Do you think that would be? I don't know if that would be the right word to use in terms
Sure.
of characteristics. Would be highly improbable to allow for the existence of a Christian God. Well, I think that usually, they in terms of the evidentiary claims given for God, which again I do dismiss in terms of like proven God, the necessity of those characteristics are usually based off what would be what would be likely to produce a God which could be said to exist. I don't necessarily see how I don't know if this is just me, but like let's say I was to say like the likelihood of God being A, B, C, D, E, F. God could be like God being any of these characteristics. One, I don't necessarily think that we understand the characteristics themselves, so it kind of becomes difficult in many ways because I think that it depends on the Christian God we're defining, right? Like, so there's so many Christian interpretations of God and our relationship with God that these become real messy real quick. Let's take the the omnipotence of God. Like, what's the likelihood of God being both omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent, right? I don't see how, like, for example, the addition of more predicates would reduce the likelihood of the existence of a God if he's non-contingent. If you follow, like,
Okay, so let me ask you this. If God was not considered to be necessary, would your opinion on that change?
if he was not considered to be necessary, yeah,
Mhm.
probably.
So if God is not necessary, if God is, you know, contingent or something, then you would say that, okay, when we add more claims to a proposition, when the proposition becomes more complex, there are more independent kind of atomic claims that make up the composite proposition. You're saying like
Yeah,
the
because
more claims there are,
God
the
would
less likely we're getting.
well, essentially because God would move from what would be considered absolutely simple to a complex um, attribution of various um, like um, various attributes. So it'd be like saying like, well, God is rather than God is X, which is essentially usually the Christian claim, like God is absolutely perfectly simple, rather than anything. Like he's not actually an amalgamation of various attributes. He is a single being, which is necessary and non-contingent. So if he was an amalgamation of various contingent attributes, then the existence of those attributes and then the likelihood of the coalescence within a single being, yeah, I would probably say that it would make it more or less likely. Well, less likely.
Mhm. Okay, so now why do you believe that God being defined as necessary changes that?
So I'd say that God being defined as necessary, or like in the terms of him being absolutely simple. So I would say that the best explanation of God, the necessity of God's existence, is probably Thomas Aquinas. God is actually existence itself, and so because he can't be predicated by anything else, he has to be the creator. He has to be, for him to be all powerful, all creation must be caused from him. To be all loving, he essentially has to be the end. So he has to be the finality or the foundation of all form. All I mean that in like a formal cause. And final cause. So you'd have to be able to contain. Essentially, you'd have to be prior to any universal from which we have knowledge of. So he can't be a form. He can't be he can't be an end as we know it, and he can't be any contingent power within the world, because that would limit his power in terms of creation. So the necessity and the simplicity of God, I really think, is kind of boiled into the concept.
Right. So sure. So then my question is, why do you believe that that changes the like assessment of the prior probability so that like it doesn't matter how many claims are bundled up in that definition?
Because there isn't like, it's not that there is many claims bundled up in the definition. It's like the definition is of absolute simplicity. It's like it's like if it's like there aren't attributes which are attributable to God in terms of forms. Like, so it's not that, like, when we say that he's omnibenevolent, omniscient, and so on, like, you could really sum them all up with just calling him God. He's like, the reason when we're talking about these attributes and these connections within God, what we are, and I would say what we're doing is talking allegorically in terms of human capacities and contingent capacities, to how we can understand what is the glory of God, right? So it's not that God, when we talk about power and we attribute that to God, we have no idea what that looks like to God, like what all powerful actually is. It's incoherent to us. Like, what we're saying is something that is capable of doing, like, which is why we tend to run into paradoxes a lot, actually. Like, is he lifting really heavy rocks or not? I don't know. Like, and we'll reason those out to say, like, oh, well, God is, confined by logic, fair enough, but then, there's like physical claims that seem to breach our, like, sort of nomological rules. And we have to attribute those physical claims, like, the capacity to breach our ordinary understanding of the world, like, so, the ability to perform miracles or something like that, debatable, but, maybe to God. And so when we start talking about God in this respect, I think that we're just talking about something that we don't have knowledge of, we don't understand, and really we're positing the existence of something which we don't know through attributable qualities, but through relationship to contingent existence. I know him through the causes from which I have reasoned from, which is pretty much what what Aquinas argues, right? Like, we reason to God from the effect, just as we reason to any universals from the effect. By the way, I'm not an Aristotelian metaphysically necessarily. I'm just arguing, I think, for the sake of it, is the way in which we gain knowledge of God wouldn't be through knowing God and the concept of God in some sort of ontological argument, which I think is trash, but rather we know God through the contingent means of our investigation within this world, which means we don't know God at all. We just know our relationship with God. So saying that God is X or God is Y, I would say would be fundamentally incoherent to the nature of God. God is absolutely simple, so saying that he is or is not something else is nonsensical. He is only himself. He partakes in his own existence, and that's it. I mean, saying he is even like a wrong thing to do.
It's a very, very complex argument you've just given, but one of the things that I got from that is it sounds like you're saying that claims about God, such as, the claim that the Christian God exists, isn't really a claim that like a being with all these properties exists, but rather like we presuppose that there's something that is God, and then we're making observations about the nature of that thing that we presuppose exists.
Yeah.
And so when we say the Christian God exists, what we mean is God has these kind of quote unquote Christian properties. Is that right?
Well, it's more like God is the creator and sustainer of all things. To be the creator and sustainer of all things, God would require X properties, or God would require the capacity to do X, through genera, or through generation. So it would be more of like, we would be looking at how God created reality rather than what God is. So it would be defining our relationship with God, which is essentially the scholastic separation between God and the Godhead. God being our relationship and our, our belief in some sort of our relationship with God, which would be defined as like, in a Christian sense, this all-loving fatherly figure who is, creating the world in such a way as to maximize the greatest of all possible, the best of all possible worlds, whilst the actual God himself, like what we are talking about, even the attribution of the name seems to be quite wrong. I mean, like, to be entirely honest with you, like even when we use the word God, I mean, in the Bible, when they call him Yahweh, like in in the Hebrew, that simply means to be. So it's it really, there isn't anything like characteristically attributable to God that I would say was a rational claim. Like you could say like, oh, God is X. It's like no, it's not. Like it's unknowable. It's transcendent. It's transcendent.
So I mean, sure, but at the same time, people are claiming that a thing exists, and when you ask them what the thing is, they give you various attributes, and they say if it didn't have this attribute, it wouldn't be the thing that I'm claiming exists. And I'm interested in determining whether or not that thing exists.
Well,
so,
I understand that. Which is why I said, like, I mean, I basically did say I think the question's pointless. But I guess what I would say is that we could determine whether our relationship with the thing is more or less likely to be that which is described in Christian scripture.
That would, when you say, like, assess the relationship that we have with a thing presupposes the existence of a thing, so I wouldn't do that.
No, but I mean, like, so for example, like, for God to be the Christian God, I think that the way that if I was maybe you in this scenario, I would probably argue that what defines the Christian God is not simply the existence of this necessary simple being, because, well, that makes life really easy for me, but rather our relationship with that necessary, non-contingent being, which makes life really hard for me, because now I need to explain how God can both be necessary and non-contingent, yet be capable of having a rational, conceivable relationship with Christians as such to be the Christians' God. Now, I think that I guess my response to that would be that Christians, in the enlightened sense, are allegorical. They recognize that actually what they are talking about in relationship to God is actually through analogy, and it's their relationship with the infinites of their own experience of ethics, of their own experience of being, and all of which would be necessarily dependent upon this simple first cause. And that's how I would probably wiggle out of that. Now, you could probably, actually, I'll let you push back any way you want, rather than just, argue with myself for the next hour.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm still very unconvinced that there's some difference between the existence of God and any other claim that would mean that we can't make any judgments about the probability of that claim.
You mean like another unfalsifiable, like there's a gardener who's I don't know if you know the parable of the gardener.
I don't.
Oh, well, like Anthony Flew, like who I said, God dies the death of 1,000. It's a very similar argument. He basically gives this parable, and he says he was a very prominent atheist philosopher, and he said, two men walk into the woods, right, and they come across a clearing, and this clearing is like a garden. It's really like all the plants look well cared for, ordered. If anything, you could say it appeared designed. Two people, when they approach this, they go, one says a gardener must be here. There must be a gardener who is keeping this area to look like this, and another says, nah, it's just natural. It just happened. It's happenstance. Like eventually, some areas of the woods would eventually look like this. And so what they decide to do is test it. So they wait for the gardener. Gardener doesn't show up. Man hypothesizes that the gardener is actually invisible, and so is the gardener's actually invisible, and so they can't see him. So then they set traps. And then he says, well, no, the gardener's intangible. Like, you can't touch him. Like, he can move through things if he wants to. And he goes, okay. And then, the more and more they try to, prove the existence of this gardener, the more qualities and attributes the gardener obtains. It becomes like, essentially the same as the Christian God. And then what Anthony Flew really says is that God dies the death of 1,000 cuts in this. It does, like, the existence or non-existence of the gardener now makes no relevance to whether the garden is or is not the way it is, because it doesn't add any explanatory power, so it's pointless to talk about. Now, he doesn't go so far to say that it means that the gardener doesn't exist, because it is unfalsifiable. And if it's unfalsifiable, then we have no evidence to believe or not to believe it in any other way. So that's basically where I exist. I think that, yeah, you could say that there was this like fucking demon gremlin thing that was like with all of these different qualities. Now, I would probably say, unlike Flu in this respect, the attribution, as you've said, of these qualities to a being probably increases or decreases the likelihood of that being's existence. Why the hell would I believe in an actual gardener who's like intangible, invisible, and so on? It seems to me that it could be explained in a simpler, in a simpler argument, which would give us greater explanatory power or greater knowledge, and so would be more acceptable. Natural processes of the world or something like that. But when you make the cause something from which is necessary and simple, like absolutely simple, so it's non-contingent, and then you also make it the ontologically separate from our experience of reality, and instead something more like, essentially like transcendently causal, like it is not transcendently causal, maybe transcendently causal, but like transcendently causal, then it becomes a separate question. We start asking questions from which there are no, greater likelihood of answers for. So, like, why is there existence over non-existence? There isn't really an answer for that. It's kind of a pointless question, isn't it, really? I mean, like, we're not going to find an answer for it. There's nowhere we can look for evidence for. And logically, all we know is that existence seems to be necessary. Or at least it's necessary right now, and must be necessary in some respects for it to be possible. It's necessarily possible, right, in a mortal sense. So that's about as far as we get in terms of why it's the case, like sufficient reasons. We're not going to find one, and we're not going to find the necessary reasons either, because we're essentially looking within existence for the cause of itself, when we need to look prior. Do you see why I would say that maybe there is no reason to think more or less of for or against the existence of a being which is necessary and simple like this? Or
So what do you mean by like absolutely simple?
Partakes only in itself. I would say that its essence would be existence. Yeah.
I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know what any of that means. Partakes only of itself. What does that mean?
So I'm using quite a Platonic word there. So that would be saying I would say that it would be irreducible to any other causes. It can't be explained through the combination of other attributes. I would say that it is and only is itself. I would say that the more than that, it's it can't be something like hylomorphic in the sense that it can't be constructed of multiple parts. It And then yeah, I mean that's kind of what I mean, like simple as in like a single unit of its own.
Okay. Like
Was it
elementary.
yeah,
Yeah.
like elementary, like sui generis as well, like it's of its own genus.
Mm. Okay. Necessary, simple. I do not see how that connects in any way to like finding evidence about something.
Right. Well, so. Okay. So where would you say that we would gain evidence from?
Just by like the prior probability. Like we just look at how many alternative hypotheses there are with the same level of specificity. So you just look at like how many independent claims there are in like that compose the composite claim that the Christian God exists. And for each one of those, it can be either true or false. So you do 2 to the power of that. That's the number of permutations or combinations of those truth values. And we say that that is sort of a first approximation upper bound on the probability of this thing existing. I mean, this is just how prior probability is calculated mostly.
So like I mean like so like the probability, like so I mean when we talk about something existing or non-existent, I'd say the probability isn't just based off, let's say it would be based off like either the rational like so if we're looking at so for example the likelihood or non-likelihood of the existence of any of the attributable belief states that would have to have, right? Their beliefs about something, aren't they? So like there would either be rational, like there would be a priori, essentially analytic beliefs, or there would be like a posteriori, or synthetic beliefs, or both, a priori synthetic. So when we look at, let's say, the let's say like let's say the argument for the existence of the Christian God is I don't know, man. Like, so I mean, one, it would be dependent on the argument you gave for the existence of God, which I think is a bad way.
Wait, well, sorry. It depends the probability, the prior probability that you assign to the proposition that the Christian God exists is dependent on how somebody justifies the existence of God, how somebody explains why they think that God exists.
Sorry, could you say that again? I couldn't catch that.
I'm just clarifying if I understand what you just said. So it sounded to me like you're saying that like the assessment of the prior probability of a proposition is dependent on some argument made for the proposition.
No, well, I mean, what I was saying is that in terms of the proposition itself, like the proposition is constructed, like say, by premises which are themselves, essentially contingent upon definitions and the likelihood of those definitions actually being, the case. So I mean,
I don't understand what you mean by that. It was like the proposition is composed of premises. Do you mean the argument is?
The argument is composed of premises. Yeah, sorry. So I'm thinking of
okay,
the argument. So I'm
but
thinking
there is
of,
no argument in question here. We just have a claim. We just have a conclusion.
Right. So
now.
right. So you're just saying like right. You're just actually asking like rather than saying like whether I can come to an evidentiary claim of the existence or non-existence of God. What is the necessary the probability of even accepting the hypothesis of the existence of God. Is that right?
Okay, so it's like let's see. So like let's just do it like with like some like a dice. Okay, so you've got a d20, right? And if you make the claim so that the proposition in question is when I roll this dice, it will land on a 6, right? So the probability of this occurring is 1. The prior probability of this occurring is 1 divided by the number of equally specific alternative hypotheses, like plus 1 for the actual claim that's being made. So
okay.
This would be. I'm sorry.
I said no. I'm just listening. I'm just like
okay. So the that would be 1 divided by, in this case, 20. There are 20 possibilities. So the prior probability is 1 divided by 20. Now, not all dice 20s are fair, right? So this would be, I don't have any information about how this dice is weighted. So I just look at how many things could possibly happen, and that's my starting point for the assessment of the probabilities. Then you roll the dice a whole bunch of times, and you figure out, it's actually weighted on the 6. The number 6, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like when you roll the dice, you take into account every time you roll the dice and you come up with a number, you start asking, well, what is the probability of this hypothesis being true? What is the probability of observing this string of results, which are weighted so heavily in favor of the number six, if it is true that my that it's like more like that this dice is weighted towards the six versus it being fair, let's say. And over time, you would kind of improve the you would get closer to a belief about whether or not it's weighted. So like first you assign a prior probability, and then over time using Bayes' theorem, you adjust that prior probability using the evidence that you acquire.
Yeah, okay,
right?
I get that. Yeah, that makes sense.
So what you've said is that the Christian God cannot be like you cannot accrue evidence for or against the Christian God, which
Yeah.
would mean that whatever our prior probability is, that is the probability of
Yeah.
that proposition.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So now, if we look at like what is the prior probability of the Christian God exists, well, the Christian God exists is actually a conjunction of a number of claims, right? As you say, it is there is something that meets each of these attributes, and then we say, and furthermore, there's like one being that has all of them or something, right? And so what we've got is like roughly like 29 atomic propositions that make up this proposition, right? And it can go even further. Like it's unclear where exactly we have the abstraction level here for like how far do we decompose these propositions? Is it actually only 29, or does one of those 29 break up into another 50 more simple propositions and so
you're
on?
saying the predicates of the proposition, like the more predicates, the like greater the the lower the probability.
The greater the complexity, the lower the probability. Yeah, and so what we're doing is establishing an upper bound on this prior probability. It's at least this small.
But
right? It's higher than
like
this.
my argument against that was that these attributable predicates are not actually attributable to the ontology of a god. So whether we're talking about the existence of a god, we're not actually capable of predicating an attribute to God. We are, if we do so, we've already defined him contingently. Like this is the issue with an absolute.
Right.
Like if it is absolute, then it's non-contingent, and me giving it a quality would be making it determinate and not itself anymore. So I can't say it is X, I can't say it is Y, because I've already attributed essentially something to it. So if we talk about, let's say, what is the Christian God, like when we talk about these predicates, what we are really talking about is, and I think this is more of the scholastic view, at least like some of the scholastics actually, is what we're actually talking about is our relationship with that God. Not really. It's more of like, what would we?
I can't grant this for the sake of the argument, right? Because
I know you can't grant this,
right?
Yeah, no, I know. I'm not going to say that it's. I'm not certainly not, because I'm not going to presuppose it, because I am agnostic on the existence of this God. But it's more of the fact that we aren't giving a definition of God. Like God is actually indefined. What we are defining is something. It is our relationship with God. Now, or with the relationship of a proposed or hypothesized simple being, if that makes it a little bit easier. So rather than having to grant it, you could say like, okay, if God exists, our relationship with God, or the Christian relationship with God, explains God through these predicates, although they would also acknowledge that those predicates are not of God, but of our understanding or our capacity to understand the powers of God. They are allegorical to the power of God, or to the being of God.
So you're saying that these definitions that we can come up with these attributes aren't actually the definition of God.
None of these are predicable to God.
There is no definition of God, right?
Yeah, none of these are predicable to God.
Okay. So then basically this is saying like, okay, well,
it's pointless.
the Christian God, when we say whether or not the Christian God exists, the statement is meaningless. When we say the Christian God, the just the term the Christian God is meaningless. There is no definition for it.
Meaning, well, this is the thing, right? So this was kind of like where like Anthony flew, like he's very. I think the point of him saying it's not meaningless, it's pointless was very deliberate. If we were to say it's meaningless, then then we would have to define like what we mean by meaningless, like, and then you know like
Well,
you
just
got
something without a definition, I would say.
would you? I would say like because I can talk about something like, for example, I can talk about an infinite and it have meaning. I can just say I don't understand the depth and complexity of that meaning, and I think that is essentially what they would say.
So you seem to have a Platonic view of like ideas here. You're saying that there exists a concept of infinity that is outside of your mind, and what you mean when you say infinity isn't necessarily the quote unquote meaning of
I would
infinity.
probably
You
say
might
I'm a
not know
realist.
what infinity is,
I
right?
would probably say I'm a realist in terms of universals. I don't think I would go in so far to say I'm like an exaggerated or a Platonic realist. I would probably go so far as to say that universals exist, at least in the sense that I'd say that like I mean this is explainable either in like Platonic, Aristotelian, or even conceptualist terms. Like we don't like the only thing that this wouldn't make sense in really is probably like a nominalist position. You know, if we reject the reality of a universal, then what we are saying is that then that there is a particular God from which is non-allegorical to anything, that really like, well, even then I think that like this is the issue ontologically. If we take, let's say, the Aquinian point that we're reasoning from effect to cause, and cause is this being that is being posited, and it is undefined or undefinable.
Well, no, the thing is that does have a definition where the definition there is that which caused what we observe.
Yeah, but I don't think that it's like I don't think that necessarily defines the being in question, does it? Like I don't think that like that.
Oh, it does exactly, because the point of a definition is to explain what it is we mean when we use the word.
I don't think we're defining a thing. We're defining the causal relationship to the thing and ourselves, or the relationship of reality to that thing. So it would be like it's like I don't know. I don't think I get the definition of a rock by saying that thing that got wet by the ocean, or like was you know what I mean? Like defining you do not define something by what it's not, or its relationship to what it's not. Although we do gain perhaps like maybe we gain, if anything, knowledge of the thing that we are relating it to.
Like when you say like you know, we're talking about what God isn't, it's like, well, what do you mean by God though, right?
Well, that's I've already said it, like this simple necessary being.
Okay, so that's the definition, right? That's what we mean by a definition. It's what you mean by a word. That's all definition means.
Yeah, but I mean, like in terms of the ontological foundation for the definition, isn't it? Like, so it's like, look, if I say that something is simple, like infinite and simple and non-contingent, right? That tells you absolutely fucking nothing, though, does it? Like, it just tells you that it is something from which you can't ontologically grasp. Which is kind of like, this is the frustration of an absolute.
There are well-defined meanings for those words that you just used, for like necessary.
Yeah,
and,
but where did
presumably for absolutely simple?
Okay,
and
so
that does tell me something.
So like, what we need to ask is where the definitions come from. This is where we're going to get into the problem of universals, right? Where do the definitions come from? Do they come from our interaction with contingent particulars? And if they do, then our understanding of the definition of God would be, once again, dependent upon our relationship with our experiential with particulars. Now, if you say like, okay, well, wait a minute, what they are is I don't know, like purely analytic. You know, like They're not actually defined by, like, this would be like a Platonic conception. They're not defined by a relationship with a particular. They're actually defined by the absence of a relationship with the particular. And do you see what I'm saying? So if I was saying, like, all right, well, what this necessary being actually is exactly not what the definition of these words would be in the form in which we know them. Do you know what I mean? Because in knowing them, we've given them contingency, and it is a necessary being. This is why people ended up going, God is, like, you can't speak of God. Like, we can only talk about what God isn't, or we can allegorically speak of our relationship with God. Well, you know, God is this. Our relationship is with this creator and sustainer of all things, or whatever, which is absolutely simple. Well, what does that look like? It's existence itself, right? What is existence itself? It's an infinite, it's undefined, because to define something is to add an aspect of nothingness, essentially, you know, to add privation. And this is why, like, it's so complex in this respect, because to give meaning to something is to differentiate it from something else. So I'd have to be able to go, it is, like, not only is it, like, it is X and not Y, but I can't do that to God because I can't put a predicate of him because he's simple. So it's kind of like, it's pointless. It's fucking pointless. I don't know what to tell you, man.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying, like, part of the definition of God is that God cannot be in a definition, essentially. Like, there's an entailment there. It's like part of the definition of God is that God is absolutely simple. And if something is absolutely simple, then it cannot be defined.
It's kind of like what we'd call, like, I don't know if you've, like, so there's a guy called, like, Eckhart, and he talks about God and the Godhead, right? So the origin of God, as in our concept of God, would be the Godhead, which is really just a stand-in signification as something that is distinct from the predicates from which we apply to God, which is the cause. Because if we define, let's say we define God as the first cause, or we, you know, attribute first causes to God in this necessary simple creature, or necessary, even creature as a fucking, like, predicate, then is by a predicate in anything, we've already changed the nature of God. In changing the nature of God, it's no longer God.
See, I don't understand this. Like, when all a definition is, right, is just saying, like, here's what I mean when I say this word. So if you're saying that you cannot make a definition for God, then you are saying, right, that any statement about God, just the Christian God, or God with that kind of, like, context, is just a meaningless statement. It's like there's no meaning behind it. Right?
Well, I guess this is where I would disagree. I'd say that you can talk about, I think, like, by talking about God, you are essentially, like, if you were to talk about God in, like, when we talk about God allegorically, it's like I can talk about something, like, if I was talking about something like infinite, and I talk about it allegorically, it's more of a communication of my relationship with that infinite. It's not to say that it's meaningless. It's to say that I can't comprehend the meaning that is the ontological foundation in which it relates. So, like, I wouldn't say that a definition, for example, for example,
the thing is, right, if you were talking about infinity, and you don't have a full, quote unquote, full understanding of infinity, then when you say infinity, you just mean something different than a person would mean if they did understand the full meaning of infinity, had a full concept of infinity.
This is the thing. Do you think anyone understands infinity?
Possibly. There's a difference between, like, understanding something in the sense of, like, defining what it is and being able to determine exactly when something is or is not infinite, versus, like, being able to keep it all in your head at once. Like, by that definition, we don't understand, like, anything. We don't understand apples, because you would have to, like, hold every single quark in your head at the same time.
It's the same thing with God when he gets called the greatest conceivable being. But then the conception, the greatest conceivable being would be greater conceived by itself. So definably we don't have knowledge of that conception. We have knowledge of our conception of the greatest conceivable being, just as we have knowledge of our conception of infinity and not infinity itself. It would be like the distinction, essentially. It's like the definition. It's like when Aristotle or Aquinas says, everything begins in the intellect before it exists in being. Essentially, what he's really saying is that epistemologically, our simple notion is the fact versus the reasoned fact, I think he calls it, is undeveloped and is a stand-in for the thing itself. The thing itself, the reasoned universal conception, has a one-to-one correspondence with reality. So that definition is the thing, and they can be replaced at any given time. When I say that word after it is a reasoned universal, I am directly corresponding that signification and that conceptual framework with a reality which is indemonstrable, which exists in and of itself. Now, this is the thing. I think we could probably have, the former, the universal, like the infinite, or understanding of the infinite, or our understanding of the greatest conceivable being. But I don't think that we can have the ontological nature of God. We can't actually reason out syllogistically or dialectically to the nature of God. So we never actually obtain a correspondence with God to the point in which when we speak God's name, we actually speak something other than our understanding of God. It's meaningful because it's communicable. It translates an idea from which another individual can also conceive of and understand, but it's not demonstrable of reality. So in terms of the proofs of God, the point of talking about God and his attributes, it's meaningful, but it's pointless.
I just don't understand. Like, okay, so you're saying that's meaningful in the sense that, like, we can say the word God in various sentences and people, like, have some ideas that get triggered when you say that? Like it's a communication?
This is where they would say it's actually a communication of our notions of God and what we conceive of as the greatest conceivable being. But we don't actually have.
See, that's what I'm referring to when I say the Christian God, right? Is I'm talking about people's conception. Like, this is what, like, when people say the Christian God, here's what they're referring to. Here's the claim that they're making. They're saying that something exists with these attributes, and that's what I'm talking about when I say the Christian God. Is that conception that people have of it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you talk about the conception of people, like, I completely agree that people's conception of God is absolutely false. Like, it's just not what God is in any way. Like, but I think that's
Wait, what do you mean by what God is?
So
you just have a different, you just have a different definition of God then.
No, it's more of the fact it's the realization that the signifier is a stand-in for something which is ontologically undescribable. So it would be like it'd be like trying to like I'm trying to say it would be like for me to try and say, like, if you were to say, like, this is like why I think, like, when it says like I am or something like that, the idea of the pure simplicity of existence is in and of itself, it's something that it's like something that goes beyond our conceived notions. Like, we can't conceive of the infinite of existence, right? Which is kind of like the whole point. But we can talk about existence in a way which is meaningful in relation to us and to other determinate objects. But when we talk about existence itself, it becomes nonsensical, or it becomes I would say it becomes pointless. Its meaning can be captured in communication, in allegory, in something which is transcendent, but it's only really giving an indication of the existence of something from which we do not understand but have experience of. That is what I would say that the Christians understand the Christian God to be, versus the like something like that this is actually like God is X, Y, and Z. Like God isn't actually like, they aren't going like, right, God has a beard, God is very tall, like any kind of contingent properties of God. They define God in relation to universals from which they have allegorical experience. Like God has the power of all creation. Like God is the creator and sustainer. He's all powerful. God is, eternal and eternal and all present, or eternal in every way. So he's omnipresent. God is essentially the completion of the universe and its beginning, and so is the final cause of reality. So he is all good. He is the measure of value. He's like the yardstick. That relationship to God is our relationship with the reality which we experience and the attributable causes of all of that reality to a single unified entity from which is infinite and indemonstrable. Like we simply cannot access it. It's ontologically separate. We can talk about it, hypothesize about it, allegorically share experiences about it in a meaningful, communicable way. But when we talk about it, we're not actually speaking of the thing and its predicates. Lack of predicates, actually. The thing and its definition. We are giving instead a description of our own experiences and our conceptions of divinity. We're talking more about ourselves and our growing understanding of ourselves and our relationship with whatever it may be, rather than the thing itself.
Okay, well, if people are just talking about like their relationships with their concepts of divinity or whatever, I can't really argue that that doesn't exist. People do have concepts of divinity, and there's like there would be a whole bunch of different concepts of God that would correspond to people's different relationships with divinity. But that's just not what anybody like. Maybe some people think this way, but like a large portion of Christians, I would say the vast majority of Christians, believe in a being, some thing, entity, conscious personhood that created everything and has these specific attributes, such that if some being didn't have these attributes, it would not be God. That's what a definition is.
Oh yeah,
it's something that's like,
don't get me wrong.
If it has these attributes, then it's,
I don't even disagree.
right?
I would say that there are some people's notions of God which I find fundamentally stupid. Really.
Okay, so
like
it sounds to me,
it's not
it sounds to me like you have like you put meaning in the word itself separate from whatever meaning anybody puts in it. Like there's some essence to the word God, and you're saying you can only assign that label to certain things. I don't understand this.
Well, it would be a single unified infinite irreducible.
That's what that's the meaning that you assign that label to.
It wouldn't be me. It would be, I mean, an entire tradition. Look, like saying like, can I give, like, when we talk about, this is why I said, like, when we talk about the Christian God, I said, like, at the start, I was like, which Christian God do you mean? Like, depending on, like, if you're a fundamentalist, versus, let's say, someone who's talking about like the allegorical nature of God, which is separate. Like, Scripture's not giving us anything but revelation, and that revelation exists to point us in the direction of God and not like tell us the nature of God and so on. Like it totally depends on the Christian like sect you're talking to and the Christian you're talking to. I mean, shit. Like what you would be predicable of God would be dependent upon that. Of course. But like what I'm saying is that in this conception, which is the one I'm willing to defend, which I think is really the only one that is defensible, it's the belief or disbelief of God is pure 50-50.
So, and your conception of God is what? What are the what's the definition here?
So I'd just say like the greatest conceivable being, or like I'd say something like either the greatest conceivable being, or that which is necessary, absolutely necessary, absolute necessary, and it would have to be maybe like the first and last cause of, or like even just the creator, I think would probably suffice. The foundation, like the cause of creation.
Okay. So for yours, right? What you've got is two independent claims. So absolutely necessary and is the creator of everything. I'm quite certain that each of those propositions breaks down further, but we can just treat them at that level of abstraction. What we've got then is 2 divided by 2 to the power of 2, which is 1 divided by 4, which is 0.25. You've said that you can't accrue evidence for or against this thing. So we'd have to finish with a probability of 0.25, which I would not say is absolutely,
I mean,
is almost certainly non-existent. So I would say that under this definition, without breaking things down any further, I'd agree. But I'd also say that this is not at all what I mean by the Christian God. It's not what like anybody means
well, I mean,
by the Christian God.
I mean, like kind of is. I mean, like one, I would go to say, I would say that the things that I've described as predicable are really stand-ins for the simple nature of God, which is why in the Bible he's called Yahweh, which means to be. He says to he says to Moses, my name is I am. Like, I mean, fuck, like that is you got anything simpler than that?
Okay, but the thing is, like, this is clearly not the definition in use of God,
Because
like
the way
people,
that
at least,
well, it's because of the way that people are talking about God is in relationship to an allegorical relationship with this absolutely simple
but they're not saying that it's just an absolutely simple, necessary
well, a lot of them
creator
are.
of
I mean,
everything.
like I think they are. Like, so for example, the Catholicism,
They're
the
not.
largest Christian
They also
sect.
claim that he's absolutely powerful, which
Yeah,
does not follow from being the creator of everything, does not follow from being absolutely necessary. They also claim that he's omnibenevolent, which absolutely doesn't follow from anything else in this definition. They say that,
One second.
is infinite, immutable, eternal. None of these things follow from the definition you've given. So the definition in common parlance must be extended.
Well, one, I actually made a mistake there. It's I am that I am. Thanks, Sovereign Studies. That's what he says to Moses. But the thing is that and I think that's the burning bush as well. He doesn't even appear, like, he can't appear in his form. He just appears as something that's just like incomprehensible. It's talking burning bush. But anyway, the thing is that the thing is that the attributable qualities to God are attributable to our relationship with God, which is essentially the alpha, the omega. Like, is usually what, like, I am the alpha, the omega. The beginning and the end. Like, that is what God is to Christians. He is right. It is the fundamental, intangible, simplistic existence which makes things be or not be, right? And in that, they say that he's omnipotent because everything is created essentially causally connected to him. He's omniscient because even he's and this is all allegorical, by the way. He's omniscient because everything that does or does not exist would be produced by their deliberation or their action. And then the omnipresence, he is the foundation and existence of everything. It could not exist without him. He is causally foundational to all determinate being.
I mean, that doesn't mean that he exists everywhere, first of all. But
well, it would mean that it depends on what you take existence to be. I mean, that's essentially the existence of something as being, like, so for example, the existence of a cause within its within its
Yeah, but that's not what
product.
anybody's saying, right? Like
Well,
omnipresence, like almost
depends.
everybody,
Like,
any
well, it
Christian you
depends on
talk to,
no,
and
no.
you say,
It
like, if you
depends.
go up to like any Christian on the street and you ask them, okay, what does it mean that God is omnipresent? They're saying God is everywhere. God is within my heart. God is within my skin. Like this is what they mean. They don't mean like
I don't know,
God
man.
is the cause. Like
I don't know. Like, I think that they would say that God is intimately connected with the fundamental nature of reality. Like that, like I don't think that the necessary like, and what an average individual thinks on the street. Like, look, like the average atheist's a fucking idiot. Like, I don't judge atheism by the average atheist. Like,
oh, but the question,
Christ.
no, but no. But if like the atheists were saying that there was some particular making some particular claim, right? And we were asking about the atheist conception of that thing, then we wouldn't be looking at
Yeah,
perspective
well, look, yeah,
philosophy's
look,
particularly
no, no, but
niche definition of it.
look at one. Like, if we take the average atheist's, like, for example, claims for the non-existence of God, they have nothing to do with anything that you've just said about the, like, you know, the possibility, or was it like
We're not
the
talking about an
predicability of the
atheist
definition
of anything,
well,
so
like,
that's
or
irrelevant.
the atheist rejection, right? Like, of a proposition. Like, a lot of the time atheists come up with arguments related to, like, let's say the problem of evil is complex for atheists. Most atheists, and this is with Christians as well, I'm not holding a bias, or like Christians and, like, you know, atheists in general, like the average everyday individual's relationship with religion is dogmatic and undefined. I think judging by the average everyday individual, and not, like, for example, I don't know, the entire intellectual tradition, which, you know, is foundational to the religions which they partake, which they choose not to investigate, is probably, you know, a little bit more fair. Like, I think that I mean, like, look, like, for example, the definition I gave is one which is connected to one of the most foundational thinkers in Christendom at all, like, ever, like, with Thomas Aquinas. I've mentioned, for example, the medieval problem of the universals and the scholastics, and how they were approaching that. The entire time I've been referencing Christian debate, not some random niche, like, haha, I thought about this when I was in the bathroom, lol. Like, you know, like, I've actually been talking about the concepts which have been debated within, you know, academics.
Some of them, but you can't deny that God is also considered to be omnibenevolent. Like, that's a separate thing that can't be derived from either of the things that you just talked about.
Well, omnibenevolent, yes, it can. I mean, like Aristotle, Aquinas would relate this to the final cause. You know, like, it essentially is the completion of everything, which is the measure of goodness, because good is essentially the attributable measurement of something actually completing its nature. And since God is the end of reality, is the final cause, then is essentially God is the measure from which all creation gives, like, essentially is measured against. So God
something fulfilling its nature. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So like that this is like an Aquinian understanding of goodness. So, like, it would be like functional. So, like,
right. So literally everything is good then.
No, but you'd say that some things do or do not fulfill, like, a natural function. So, like, for example,
what do you mean by a natural function? How could something not fulfill a natural function?
A seed which does not germinate has not fulfilled its function as being a seed.
How do you determine that the function of that seed is to germinate?
Yeah, but this is the problem of universals. Do I understand? Do I understand the, like, this is where, like, you get, like the functional cause of man and so on. Like, functions themselves are understood in relation to, or understood in relation to, let's say, like, processes which are complete, or which explain the nature of a thing. Like, the nature of a thing is to go through the process. What makes a seed its seed? It would be definable as the capacity to, you know, germinate, have the potentiality to germinate, and progress on to a bush, a tree, and so on, right? So then you would say
definitely a biologically controversial take right there, because, like, a lot of biologists would say if you have a malfunctioning seed, it's still a seed.
Yeah. So would Like that, you would just say it's a bad seed. That's yeah, that's what they're saying.
I mean,
Like, but
but why
by
do you
saying that,
consider it
if
to be
anything,
bad? Is because it's like it goes against the nature of a seed. But what's the nature of a seed? Well, it's whatever a seed does. Well, this is a seed, and this seed is not germinating. So the nature of a seed can't be to germinate.
This is the thing. If you accept that as a particular, and you say that the evidence of a nature of a seed is defined by our relationship with a given particular, so the nature of this given particular is its nature, then you would say yes. If you were to say that it's in fact a universal in which we relate to, so what a seed is, it's actually a universal which relates various objects by a definable explanatory claim. Like, for example, there is a difference between a seed and a nut in relation to to what they perform. Then you would say like these are all seeds. That is a pumpkin seed, that is a sunflower seed, and so on. Our understanding of these predicates is based on these universal attributes. What makes them particular is coincidental attributes, which are attributable to it being that seed, this seed, or accidental in the words of like Aristotle or Aquinas. Then we could say that a seed's ability to fulfill its function as a seed can be judged against a universal concept of what seeds are, the substance of seeds, what it means to be a seed, versus the actual individual nature of this seed. As in, this seed is
but
only a single instance of
like
seedness.
the nature is what it means. If you're saying that the nature of a seed is what it means to be a seed, then you wouldn't call it a seed unless it met that nature.
Well, so like for example, we could define humans as being like bipedal. We could say that like bipedal, like I don't know, atypically like the members of the Homo sapiens species and so on, right, like that. But even then, these like characterizations of the species, of the or genus, right, that they're actually universals built up of what. Now, this is the thing: do we come to these universals by abstraction? This is going to get like really messy, right? Because you've got like points of abstraction. Do we abstract qualities of these universals which are attributable to every single member of the species? If not, then we're probably going to find out no universals exist, and we're going to fall into nominalism, right? Because we're going to say like, well, actually, all of these qualities aren't attributable to all these things. Now, what we can say is that what I mean by a certain quality, this is maybe like conceptualism, what I mean by a certain quality or a certain species is X, and so something is characteristically falls into that species if it meets these criteria, which is exactly what we do. Like, for example, we would say that animals or whatever are usually defined by like that capacity to facilitate certain functions, interbreed, produce offspring, which makes them members of the species. If an animal is born infertile, it's still a member of the species because it had the potentiality, even if it does not have the actuality, to perform that function. Now, that would be my take on universals. Yes, universals are real. They do actually give explanatory power of reality. When I say that is a lion and that is a tiger, it has relevance to the actual determinate nature of reality, rather than just saying that's a lion, that's a lion, that's a lion, that's a lion, or we're just giving names to a collection of particulars. So, I mean, like, shit, what's your stance on universals?
I mean, I'm not sure I have a stance on universals. I would say that I most of these things I consider to be like concepts, constructs in our minds, and that like a universal is just this idea of basically an archetype or some kind of template that you take. Like it's just the idea of like the essence of a thing. It's the thing that matters to the definition of something. So there's like you would say that like something is a cat if it meets this this universal or something. If it has these qualities, these particular qualities, and there's some archetypal cat that just has exactly those qualities and nothing else, and like has those qualities perfectly, that's like the universal. And then you'd look at a particular cat and you'd say, well, it meets all those qualities, we don't care about the rest, it's a particular. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Yeah,
well, I mean, it gets really messy. So, like, for example, like a good example with a cat, but even let's say like a triangle is the perfect triangle, an isosceles or like a what the other shit? I can't remember the other kinds of triangles, like isosceles and like, oh shit, not right. Equilateral. Like what is the perfect triangle? Is it isosceles or equilateral? You know, like so when we talk about, let's say, the definable characteristics of triangleness, the substance of triangles, these universal characteristics, are we just collecting what are let's say notions which we actually just refer to reality? So nominalism would just say like, look, like this is actually just a name, and what we mean by triangle is something that we point towards outside. So we're like, that we're actually mean that thing, and that thing, and it's a collection of particulars which we can have a knowledgeable experience of, right? Now, if you were to say that, well, that's like that would be one way of going about it. Then there's like realism. So then you've got, let's say, and you've got like exaggerated realism. These are like medieval as fuck, right? So you've got like exaggerated realism, and you've got was it indifferentism? So like exaggerated realism would be like, this triangle in my mind is actually separate and real.
Yeah.
Plato, The World of Forms. Then you've got indifferentism, which would be like, the triangle in my mind is the same as all of the triangles outside of my mind, and indifferent in its quality of being a triangle. It is what it means fundamentally to be a triangle. Then you've got like conceptualism. There exists a triangle in my mind, but no triangle in nature. It is a universal concept which exists, but only in my mind. In nature, there is only particulars. All of these have that, positive and negative, and there's a whole fucking huge debate going on around that. Like, well, there was a massive debate about it for like 500 years or some shit. And I would probably fall on the side of like realism. I probably would say universals are real. I would say that our conceptions of those real universals are often poorly defined and need refined, and sometimes even just wrong. Like, we just misconceive reality. Like, it has been poorly tested, and we've just misconceived the nature of reality. But we can and do reason to universals which do actually exist. Like, and I would probably take what would be somewhat close to an indifferentist position on that. So it like actually corresponds to reality.
All right, cool. But let's. I feel like we're on quite a tangent here. We may not be, but I don't quite understand.
I guess the point is that like when we're talking about like universals in this, right? It's like, if we're to say that God is, like, when we talk about this, like this God, like being like the end of everything, right? Like, if I was to say that God is good, if I'm something like a nominalist, like William of Ockham or something, I will be like pointing towards God and going, that is good. The concept in my brain not only doesn't relate to that, but is just, it's not like, I get this through faith, really. Faith and right reason. I don't really get this through I can't actually allegorically talk about God because he's in his own genres, right? He's a particular from which maybe I can get experience. I'm not sure. I can't actually. I'm maybe a bit iffy on Ockham, but he's a nominalist or a terminalist in this. If I was to say that God, so that means God is a particular, and it's only through my experience directly to God that I would gain something like kind of knowledge of God, right? If I was like Plato, I would say that it would be an end of like a dialectic, right? So like my idea of God being goodness is just the same as God being like this fundamental dialectical end in perfection. In which case, I think that if you were to take that Platonic take, you would still, like, you'd probably come to you wouldn't define God by his relationship to us. You define, like, in the sense that we couldn't have an allegorical take of God by his relationship to us. If anything, that's only going to cloud us from the nature of God. What I'm saying is probably closest to Aquinas or Aristotle, and saying that when Christians do talk about God, and they talk about God's goodness, they talk about God being, like, this perfect being, right? But he's perfect in himself, as in he is complete and immovable, so facilitates his function perfectly, in a way that we would wish to emulate, like, all that nature itself, the whole of nature would wish to emulate and bring to the glory of God, which is essentially what Aquinas says. We all wish to. It's kind of like the prime mover. Like, it is perfect, and we wish to be that, because in being that do we gain the greatest overall completion of nature itself. He is the completion of nature, in its simplicity, in its perfection, in its immovableness, right? But also, is the measure, because in completion, in absolute completion, do we find, like, the incremental nature of how incomplete we are, like how contingently not good we are. Like, there is a privation to our existence. We will never be God, and since we will never be God, the measure of not being God is in comparison to God, if you see what I'm saying.
I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what you're talking about, but it's a bit too long of a path for me to follow.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, like, I mean, like, if it's any consolation, I think it's almost entirely pointless. It's just what I do with my life.
I wish I understood why you think that it's pointless, but I can't understand these.
That's fine. I think it's
long monologues, but
I mean, that's fine. I think that, like, it's pointless because, like, from what I've said before, like, I don't think you can give any predicable, defined attributes to God and God themselves beyond our relationship with God. So it all comes down to a belief state, whether I choose to believe or not to believe. So in talking about whether you should or should not believe, it's pointless. There's no evidentiary claims you can make.
Right. Okay. So the thing is, right, I don't quite understand what exactly you're saying, but independently, there is, in fact, a conception of this being that exists that people call God, and they say that he has these particular attributes within Christianity. And, there's the various, omniscience, omnipotence, or in your case, if we're going to pare it down to your particular case, then I can, it's an absolutely necessary being that created everything and is omnibenevolent and incomprehensible, and probably a great number of other things if we were going to extend your definition to incorporate all the things that people say about it.
I think that's a misinterpretation. I think by extending the things in predicates of God, what you're really doing is you're predicating how I'm describing the being. I'm referencing allegorically notions to you rather than giving you a solid definition of God, or like he has the predicates.
Okay, maybe it would help for you to explain what you mean by allegorical.
Like comparable, like give some sort of, like, I mean, shit, allegory.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
So, like, that's, like, I can get the definition. One second. Allegory. A story or poem, a picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one, a symbol. So I would say it's symbolic. It's not descriptive.
Not descriptive.
So if I say, like, I don't know, like, if I say something was allegorical of God's, like, goodness or whatever, or like God's goodness is like, so I was like the perfect nature of God is allegorical to, I don't know, like the feelings of completion, in the sense that he's simple, and our understandings of completion and goodness are diminished or diminished but maybe relatable notions to God. It would be like metaphorical. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure. Okay. So like when you say that God is absolutely necessary and is the creator of everything, you don't actually mean by those words what people mean when they say those words. You mean some evocative expressionist sort of thing. Like I get the feeling, I get the vibe of something when you say those words. Is that the idea?
Like where you're getting like what would be a partial but absolutely inadequate notion. So it'd be like you're getting like like a vibe or
Okay.
like a
So,
meaning
so
of
it sounds
something
like
which is
another
deeper
part of
and
your So it sounds like another part of your definition would be, and there's other stuff that's true about this that I don't understand.
it would be
Like you're
like
saying it's
I
not
mean
these things that are true and some other stuff.
I mean actually like if you look into the theology of it, like so for example Aquinas would say that it would be wrong to say like there are other things true because it is truth itself. So it's like it is the measure of truth and goodness. Like so it exists because it's existence, right? Which is essentially like if what is true is what it actually exists, and God is perfectly actual in this, which is the idea of him being perfectly simple. He's perfectly actual. He is, which is like I am that I am, or to be, would mean that he is truth, like perfect truth. So to say like there are other things true is the mistake you're making.
Well, so like the thing is like you could say that something is truth itself and has also other predicates, right? So it's not a contradiction. I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, no, because you couldn't say that. It's like saying that something is. If you say that something is truth in and of itself, and say that there are other things true than truth itself, like no, that doesn't make sense. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, so if you say that like there's truth, so then we say what are the things that are true of truth? So I can just talk about the abstraction truth, the concept of truth, because I mean truth is truth. So if I say like, okay, what are the things that are true of truth? Well, truth is a concept. Well, truth is something that a lot of people value. So like,
and then all of those
something
things
that a lot of people value wouldn't.
All of those
Sorry?
all of those things would be components of truth rather than like it would be like so it would be truth would be like like they would all be describable as being true or not.
Yeah.
So it's like
And?
so like it would be like truth is
Yeah.
what truth is. Like it'd be like saying like truth is what is. Like this is the whole kind of like it's like that which is perfectly actual. And so if you start describing actual things, you're going to start describing like individual parts of an infinite which are encompassed in this universal.
Okay. I mean, you can say things about truth. You can like predicate things of truth, right? And yes, they may be they may be contained within the meaning of truth. That would be a pretty standard view of meaning, would be that it's like predicates are contained within the meaning of the object, right? Sure. That doesn't change anything. That's just like a truth about like meaning in general. I don't see how that's specific to the abstract concept of like truth or God or anything like that.
I guess like to say what truth is, what perfect truth is, would be like saying that would be to be able to give an utterance which contained absolutely every actual thing, and it would be that which is perfectly it would have a one-to-one relationship with reality, absolutely. So there's nothing that you could add to that because
so you're saying that God is literally everything
it's
when you say God is truth?
It's an absolute universal, yeah.
Okay, so God is everything. We could just skip the rest of the parts of the definition and just say God is everything because
that's it. God is perfectly
right?
simple and but yeah, I mean universal. Like I mean, yeah.
I mean, those things don't imply that God is everything, but
I mean, I'm pretty sure I just said that God like was like the cause of everything, that everything was dependent upon God for creation and would be dependent upon God for creation and sustenance. That everything, and I mean, shit. I mean, I even said that everything was not only causally affected. I mean, like, to give like the Aquinian sort of position on this, maybe I could have fleshed that out a little bit more. You actually used the word archetype before, which would pretty much sum up what creation is. It is matter doesn't exist in and of itself except from the action of God. The formal cause of everything, the notion of everything, exists in the mind of God. The creation of everything is the action made by God, and the function and purpose of everything is in relation to God's formal design, and essentially to its capacity to complete itself, which is in reference to what is absolutely complete and unchanging. So yeah, like, I don't know, maybe I didn't flesh that out a little bit more. But
okay, so if God is everything, okay, then this is a highly complex claim. To say that like God is everything, there is this thing that is everything, is to say that like, you know, it is this and not this, and is that and not that. But actually, no, like, just to say God is defined as everything, well, like, everything exists, right?
It's defined as existence. I said that
we know that everything exists.
It's defined as existence, which is exactly what I've said numerous times. Existence itself.
Sure. Okay.
Unpredictable.
Great. Okay. So if God is existence itself, then obviously existence exists. We're good. I agree with you under that very odd definition of God.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. But it doesn't solve the proposition, because like the meaning that you're assigning to the Christian God is something that could also be said about numerous many other things that are never called the Christian God, or are called by many other names. They're called the you know, well, like, for example, the Islamic God, or
really
you know,
I mean, like,
some complicated conjunctions of a whole bunch of different things.
I think the Abrahamic gods, like, it would be ridiculous to call them plural. They're talking about the same thing. The difference would be
there are different claims made about them.
Well, I mean, like, the different claims made about them usually relate to our ethical obligations within reality and our relationships to the thing, not the thing itself. I never hear them actually argue over the predicates of what God is, like, ever.
Yeah.
So
sure. I mean, I mean, the thing is, right, is like, my point is, it's pretty clearly defining your way to success. I mean, you could just define God as like an apple, and then you've got, okay, God exists, apples exist.
Well, no, I think that would be, again, like, because, you know, there would be perishables, so you'd be like, oh, that apple doesn't get it. But anyway, but then regardless, like, it is somewhat defined. I agree, like, there is somewhat a definition, like, defining your way to success in that. But then it's whether this God, I mean, really, it's whether the God is, like...
And also, if this was really like your conception of God from the start, I don't understand why you didn't just go with that from the beginning. God is everything. Obviously, everything exists.
It's
so
not
God
as
exists.
simple. It's not. It's actually, well, one. It's not that just God is everything. It's that, like, God. It's more of like what we would say was, because if we say that God, like, because if we just say that God is everything, it's like, right, okay, so everything is fundamentally attributable to God, but then we have to say that God is separate from, in the sense that, like, for example, is God my notion of everything, or is God that, like that's really what we're talking about? And I'm not a Christian. Just, I used to be a Christian, though, just to answer that. But so it's not to say that, like, so if I was to say, like, you know, God is everything and everything, you know, it's exactly what I said when I said God is existence. But the difference is that, and, like, one, how many facets we give. So if I say God is everything, and by everything I mean the combination of determinate characteristics from which is attributable to reality itself, or do I say that God is existence? They're very different. It's like one as well. Like, you could also say that, like, it depends on whether we consider everything to contain privation, because God, in this definition, couldn't contain privation. So, for example, God can't contain not being himself, whilst we can contain not being God. So the act of generation or the act of generation or creation would contain the act of not being God, but only in so much as we still exists in it as a cause. So like when I say God is existence, God gives existence, God is existence, is being, but that doesn't mean that I am God, or that, like John down the street is God.
You're
But
certainly
that
not
we are
all of God. You would be
but
part of God
this is
because
it,
God
like,
is everything.
That's it. Like it'd be like part of God, part of a greater whole, which we are trying to explain our relationship to. And that's where I would say that.
Are you or are you not saying that God is everything? Like in the sense of like all of reality, the entire universe, God is materially the universe, and like everything that is.
I mean, like when we start saying materially, I think that's where I'd say that God would be existence itself. So like more than what is materially there. So yeah.
Well, is God at least what is materially there? Is God like is every
have to be more.
thing that we observe part of God?
You'd have to be more, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so God is like, okay, well, all those things. Oh, right. So he's more than that. So he doesn't necessarily exist even if reality exists. Okay.
Well, it's
more like everything.
No,
is
it's more
God.
of like your definition of what can and cannot exist does necessarily encompass the existence of that which is absolute. It's more of an acknowledgement of our own inadequacies rather than God's.
Sorry, repeat that.
So like, it's more of an inadequacy. It's more of like a point out the inadequacies of given definitions to existence itself. So if I say existence is purely material, right, and say like, one, I'm an existentialist, so I don't think it's a fucking solid claim anyway. But like if I was to say that existence is purely material, and God is would have to be more than existence, more than material, then like if we've got like it'd be like saying like, oh well, the universe is just material and God is just like he is just matter in motion. Like I don't think that would.
I mean, you'd be saying that God is more than just matter in motion, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I'll be saying, that God is the cause of matter in motion. That's the difference. That's the necessary.
So the cause. Okay, well now we're back to the start. Okay, so it's not.
He is the beginning, and he is all of it. He is all of it. He caused it. He is it. It's everything. So it's like
God is everything over there.
So yeah, so like existence itself. I mean, fuck, I've said that like 20 times.
Okay, well, great. Okay, everything exists, right? Tautologically, I don't know why you didn't just start with that. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, I did actually start with that. I think I said about.
No, you didn't.
10 times.
You should have just said that like a billion times until I got it into my head. Like,
I said
be like,
I am,
but Asgarad, mate,
am,
everything exists. Come on, everything exists, obviously, and God is just everything.
It's not that. It's more about.
And also,
if
you think God is everything, and obviously God exists, then why do you only assign 0.5 probability to God? You should assign 100% probability to God, because obviously everything exists.
Said that. So what I said was that God would be in this, that I am existence itself is absolutely necessary being, would be that he'd be the greatest conceivable being, and the greatest conceivable being. I mean, like shit, like it's whether like if we accept the ontological argument, which is like the greatest conceivable being must exist, then yeah, like fuck, like then yeah, God absolutely must exist. The point is that whether the conception of what means what God is in terms of the like what is in terms of these infinites is allegorically connected to this relationship we have to God, which is why I said, if you're going to argue with me on this, don't talk about the existence or non-existence of this. I said it makes things too easy for me. You should instead talk to me about the relationship Christians have to God and whether it is rational or not, or whether it makes sense.
Well, that's just not remotely what I'm talking about, right? Like the point is whether or not the thing which people mean when they say God, in particular what Christians mean when they say God, the question is, does that thing that they're referring to exist? Now, I don't think that what Christians refer to as God exists, but I do think that what you refer to as God exists, because what you refer to as God is just everything.
Weird. It's so weird, because where I got this like notion of God was Christianity. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Being part of Christianity doesn't mean that you were all of Christianity, right?
No, I mean, shit. I mean, like, fuck.
Or even most.
I mean, like, I mean, the fact that the way I got this was just hundreds of years of debate, that, you know, was at the, you know, the in terms of scholasticism, and, you know, like one of the largest Christian thinkers to ever live, and, you know, both physically and mentally. Am I right? You know, like Thomas Aquinas. He was a big guy. But anyway, the thing is that like, I don't know why, like, you would say that this is niche. Like, I don't see what's
Oh, sure. Okay.
like,
Look, maybe it's not niche. It's just that I've like when I talk to Christians most of the time, my understanding of Christianity is not that it's this tautological thing. Usually, it's a particular thing that could or could not exist. Sometimes they sneak a predicate of is necessary in there, but usually it's like this specific being that, you know, it has thoughts of some
the
kind and is,
predicate.
you know, omnipotent and is able to do things and is sort of contained within the universe, or maybe it exists outside of it or something.
Yeah,
But it's not
and
usually
those
just defined as like
one
everything,
one
because like
one yeah.
but
Like, so
sure.
what are the Christians defining into one, saying that they slip a predicate of necessary in, misses the point of what necessary means, which is like non-predicable. To the point of the point of what they're saying in terms of these qualities is to give explanation to what would be this infinite, you know, like, and like, there isn't a Christian out there that says, oh, God is powerful, God is intelligent, you know, or knows a lot. No, they say all knowing, omnibenevolent, all powerful. So no, all the Christians that define God in this way, omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent, creator and sustainer of all things, are referring to the same concept. Some refer badly to like trying to say that God and give like predicable qualities to that, like what that means, what that actually is. That would be a mistake. But what they are actually referring to is our relationship with creation and the creator. Okay. They believe in a creator, and they would say that, like, if a creator exists, or they say a creator does exist, I believe a creator exists, and so these acts of creation are explainable allegorically like this. It gives us an understanding of our relationship to this notion. And I've said that
okay,
from
so
the
let me
start.
ask you, why are you an agnostic if you believe that God is everything? Do you think that there is only a 0.5 probability of everything existing?
It's more of whether God actually, it's more of whether this first cause, whether there is a first cause.
Well, even if there wasn't,
or even,
it
or
sounds
even
like you're defining God as being
or even a cause,
everything.
Or even a cause which is, or even like something, or one. I would say that the conception goes beyond human faculty, but more than that, it would be, it goes beyond what is like actually knowable. Like, you could say that it's like a priori, but I mean, like, if I say like, all right, if I say like it is just being, like I am, like it just am, then I could just attribute that to I could just say like this just exists. It's just coincidence, and not only is it coincidence, it exists in a certain way that is not explainable by, let's say, or not allegorically explainable through notions of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence. Actually, I don't like. So, for example, I think that the problem of evil, I don't. But let's say I was to say that the problem of evil succeeds. I think that, or I think that it gives greater credence or cognitive success or something along the lines to a. At least it makes me feel in such a way that I hypothesize, I believe in such a way, an act of choice in one way or the other, that God would not necessarily have to be understood as all-loving. Now, that doesn't mean that he isn't, or that I've given any evidence against it. It just means I have a belief state that this first cause, or this like fundamental like necessary being, would not have to be allegorically explainable in this way. So, like, yeah, that's why I'm an agnostic, because I think that an individual can be rational about these things. Like, if an individual says, actually, the problem of evil is just too much for me, I just can't believe in the Christian God. Right, fair enough.
Like they would be an idiot by your definition of God. You're like they're saying like, oh, like there's evil in the world, so therefore everything doesn't exist. Like they're treating with a different definition of God than you are. That doesn't apply to your definition of God.
Well, not every. So like this is the thing. Like this is the whole reason that I brought up the whole Godhead distinction. So like when we are talking about God, when they say like, oh, he's omnibenevolent, and they relate that to, they are reasoning from effect to cause, and they're saying, look, this is explainable through an act of like all lovingness, right, of caring and completion and goodness, right. I don't think that an atheist would necessarily have to attribute that as being having the greatest overall explanatory power for this being. Whether they could deny the being, they're just like, right, well, I think that your allegory shit.
Okay, but we're equivocating now. I'm not talking about like I want to stick to one, like we're talking about the Godhead, right? We're not talking about God. We're not talking about
I don't think
the relationship that people have to
I don't think that you can deny
the Godhead.
existence. I don't think you can deny existence. At all. No.
Okay, so you are not an agnostic with respect to the Godhead. You believe that the Godhead exists.
I'm not agnostic to existence. I think you have to be a fucking idiot to be agnostic to existence. It's whether that existence is allegorical to the Christian relationship to the Godhead.
Okay.
Which is why I said attack the Christian relationship to the Godhead.
Right. See, I don't quite understand like the distinction here between like the relationship to the Godhead and the Godhead. Like I understand that there is a distinction there, but I don't quite understand why you refer to God as being the relationship and having a separate term for the Godhead.
Our relationship would be
what God is.
Our relationship would be our understanding of the greatest conceivable being, and our relationship to that, whilst the Godhead.
Right. See, I would have thought a more kind of efficient way of talking about this would be to say like this is our conception of God versus then there's actually what God is, right?
Sorry, say that again. I didn't catch that.
Well, I mean, it sounds like we're talking about the same thing. It's not like there's like a Godhead, and then there's God separately. It's more like, right, there's like God, and then there's our conceptions about God, and that's what we refer to as God.
I think many people would agree, but then this would relate, like this is the whole thing with the kind of like indifferentism and so on. It's like I am talking about existence, but I'm talking about my inadequate understanding of existence and my relationship with it. Do you see what I mean?
See, I think when people claim things like God is omnibenevolent, I don't think they're saying my conception of God is omnibenevolent. I think they're saying God is omnibenevolent.
I think what they're saying is that God should be understood in this term because creation requires the production of X effects, and those effects can only be explained by something which at least contains the capacity of doing Y. So like that would be really like what I would say like the average Christian's talking about. It's like I don't think the average Christian like in fact it's usually considered blasphemous to know the mind of God, right? Like so if I was to say like I know the mind of God, so I know what it means to be all loving, I'd be considered like blasphemous a lot of the time.
Know what it means to be all loving is one thing, but saying that God is all loving is a separate thing. Like there's these presuppositions that are clearly the case in what you're talking about as God, because you're saying that he's incomprehensible at least. Right?
Half of the time, Christians don't even say all loving, right? What they say is God is love. Mm-hmm. They say like God, like do you know what I mean? They don't really like these are the like a lot of the time they don't go like God's name is love, and what they really refer to is like and you know the thing is you say that like Christians don't mean this. Well, Christians follow the church. Like a lot of them follow the church, the largest organization within Christian, like the largest Christian institution, is the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church's stance is based off Thomas Aquinas, and Thomas Aquinas's stance was that,
And yet, it's clearly not directly based on that because people don't believe what Thomas Aquinas believed.
well, I
Right?
mean, it is and it isn't. I mean, like the church has
Yeah,
developed
it's
a lot
influenced.
since. Like, I mean, like he is the primary influence in the Catholic Church by far.
Sure. Anyway, I think like our argument is completely like semantic at this point. Like it's like I'm just saying like when people refer to this being, and I mean maybe when I say this, you're like that's not the Christian God. But when I think of like a being that is omnipotent and omnibenevolent and has these various characteristics, and you know their son is Jesus and they created everything and things like that, I believe that the probability of that thing existing is very low. I will have to admit that the probability of everything existing is rather high, but I think that
Right.
to consider this the goalpost of this debate
Which
is
I mean, like
pretty odd.
like that said, like the best way to do it would be to attack like the relationship of Christians to the concept rather than the concept itself. Like,
Well, the thing is that the concept is it depends on who you're talking to, right?
oh, I agree.
Your
There's-
concept of God is just literally everything. It's just like whatever everything is, that's God, right? Many other people have more
my concept,
specific
my concept.
beliefs about what God is.
Well, I mean, like my concept would be like Aquinian.
Sure. Okay. There's yeah. Okay. Sorry. I don't mean when I say like your concept, I'm
I even
not
I
trying
even
to say
said
like
no,
it's
it's
some
fair.
super niche stuff, but
I did
like
say
I'm
I
sure
did
that
say
there's a
it
lot of
depends on
theologians
who.
who agree with you, but
Well,
I would say that if you just talk to some churchgoer, they're not going to say like, ah, yes, God is just everything. So like, you know, things moving around, that's God. And like
Actually, I think look, I
people
think
who believe in
check.
evolution, people who believe in physicalism, people who believe that there are no souls, they're also Christians. They also believe in the same God I do. Like, I'm pretty sure these aren't really what most people's
I
conceptions
don't
are.
know. I think that a lot of people, like, if anything, like I don't know if you find this, like, humility is a big part of Christianity. Like, at least it should be. At least it usually is considered a big part of Christianity. Obviously, you've got massive differences in sects of Christianity. Like not massive differences, but like considerable ones anyway. That would like affect this, especially when you get like fundamentalists and shit. But the like, for example, I think that fundamentalism is in and of itself like stupid. Like if that's any help. But the like if you were to take like for example the average churchgoer, and you were to say like well, tell me about God. Like, and they'll say like, oh, he's all over in the way. What does that mean? If you were to just go like, if you were to just keep going and just go, what does that mean? What does that mean? They'll be like, I can't explain God to you. Like, I can only, and then they'll really reference their relationship. They'll be like, I feel in my heart or something, and then or they'll go, like God is perfect. He's absolute. He's infinite. Like I can't. Do you know what I mean? I'm not God. Is usually what you'll get in response. So I don't know, man. I think Christians do this all the time. I just don't think that Christians like know why they're doing it.
The thing is, right, is like I know for a fact that if you go up to most Christians and you say, hey, would you consider me to believe in your God? And I say, I don't believe any souls exist. I don't think there's anything supernatural. I
Well-
believe that the only things that exist are atoms.
Well,
I believe that they would say, no, you don't believe in my God. But
Well-
you're saying that, yes, you do believe in their God because that's part of everything.
Well, no. Well, one, I mean, like, you could argue that metaphysic would be incompatible with the notion of like maybe like it would be non-existential or something like, and which you'd be able to give like a causal explanation of everything, maybe, which would maybe like kind of make everything contingent. But I'm not sure about that. So you could maybe argue that would be incompatible, but then like because I mean that belief state almost lends itself to the belief that there is no cause beyond the physical conception. There is no like first cause, like last cause, like final cause, and so on.
Right. See, it sounds like you're jumping between definitions a bit. Like
No,
on the one
no,
hand, it's
no,
like, well,
no.
God is everything. Maybe I
Yeah.
misunderstood you when you said this, but now it also sounds like you're saying, well, God being everything is more like an entailment of the actual definition of
no,
God.
no, like God being everything. It's like with God being like existence itself. It's whether that existence itself. I mean, if we say we can have different metaphysical claims about existence itself, and if you define existence itself as like absolutely particular and, you know, non-referential to a universal from which I could say existence actually is coherent, and instead it's actually just a term, then what you've defined is like what you would consider God then, like, wouldn't be a single simplistic being. It would be a contingent being. It would be a contingent definition of, like, it is this, that plus, like, and it would just be like 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus, like, you know, on to an infinity, when in reality what is being referenced in this definition is a simple unified substance, and that's the separation there. And that's why I said, like, metaphysically there might be an issue there if you were to go like, look, I think that everything is explainable as, like, you know, particulars in that respect.
Okay,
Physical
so it's like God is the elementary substance, the elementary particle.
It would be like elementary substance, yeah, like fundamental substance of reality, like, I think, like, or like fundamental substance of existence, essence. Well, Thomas Aquinas literally defines his essence as existence. So, like, if that, like,
that's
so
super vague, but
yeah, but you know, well, but the like so, and then obviously there's the relationship to existence, which is an ethical relationship, really, and a spiritual relationship, which is, I think, definable as what makes someone a Christian, you know, like,
well, maybe psychologically, but in terms of what these people actually believe, they're not just like, oh, there's all the reality and it's like elementary atoms and particles and quarks and stuff, and then, like, what I say as God is like my relationship with it, and it's like me in a well praying to somebody so that I don't, you know, die in the well. Like, that's not what they think of as God. They think that there's this being out there that presides over everything and creates everything, and, you know, maintains everything, and so on and so forth. Like, they're not just believing like there's all these atoms and stuff and that's God.
well, no, like, I certainly don't think that they would say, like, these atoms, like I certainly agree that they would not say that, like, a collection of particulars would be God. That's kind of like what I was saying. Like, that would be like nominalism, right? Like, I don't think they would say that, right? Like, what they're saying is that there is a unified substance which is existence itself, which makes
Well, what does it
everything
mean
else,
for something to be a unified substance?
like a universal which exists, like an actual universal which exists. It is irreducible and perfect, but like, but like, before we get onto that, like, I mean, that was only a side point. I just wanted to say as well, not all Christians, like, for example, when you say a soul, like, Christians don't necessarily believe in souls. That's quite a Platonic notion in itself. Like, a lot of them inherited that, but I think that just goes to show, like, a lot of Christians don't understand their own religion even. Do you know what I mean? Like, Christians usually, like, are like, not necessarily materialists, but they do believe them, like, a lot of them believe them, like, the essence in the material, right? Like, what is you is part and parcel to your body and your physical experience of reality, right? Which is why you get, like, Hicks replica theory, where if you're like, you are actually reincarnated in your physical form in heaven, and that is just a perfect absolute copy of you. So like that, like, so like, you know, and then you get, like, different variations of this. So, like, in terms of, like, metaphysical claims about what existence is, like, they can lend themselves, like, so if you were to say, like, look, there is no such thing as existence as a unified, like, absolute, like, that would be a way you could argue against this. Like, if you were taking the nominalist route, like, nah, what are you fucking talking about? There is no such thing as existence. It's not a predicate. Being is not a predicate. And then that's hard to fight. Like, and then I'd say, like, being is a predicate, and then you say being is not a predicate, and then I'm in, like, well, basically we're, like, 50-50, right? Like, like, or like, well, actually, we could be more or less 50-50 if you could give an argument that was better or worse, like, you know, for nominalism versus something like or like something like I don't know, yeah, like a realism. So if you could give an argument for, like, conceptualism, terminalism, or nominalism, and not a realism for universals, then yeah, I'd probably be, like, quite snookered in that, and that would be, I mean, that is an actual argument against Thomas Aquinas. So, but that's an argument against, like, his conception of God. Or, like,
anyway, I mean, as I say, like, the argument is semantic, right? It's like, okay, well, so we've got these two different conceptions of gods, the one that I'm talking about and the one you're talking about. I agree that the one you're talking about definitely exists. I couldn't fathom anybody saying that it doesn't exist. But then separately, there's like the conception that I think is much more popular, but that again, that is a semantic disagreement.
I mean,
That's just literally like, oh, I think we should mean this by God, and I think you should mean, all right.
well,
So I'm not gonna like, I think we should just split it into two things and say, I agree with you on that one. Now, do you agree with me on this one? Do you agree that a being who has all of these attributes, who is omnipotent, who has the properties of aseity and eternity and omnibenevolence and graciousness and holiness and immanence and immutability and so on and so forth, all the things that people believe about God, that God gave birth in some way to Jesus, or is in some sense the father of Jesus, or that Jesus is God's corporeal form, and all of the other claims made about God, including that he created the universe and so on. Do you believe that a being that has these attributes is highly improbable?
well, to kind of just do this, I think that, like, if you were to say, like, for example, if you were to take like biblical story to be fundamentally true, as in like an accurate historical description of events that really did happen, um, um, then and yeah, and they are describable, and like, for example, fundamentally in the definitions of the words, like it like, yeah, I would say that's highly improbable. I mean, I would actually argue against fundamentalism in that respect and say that it's just not even the way language works. Like, we couldn't, and I would argue for like a hermeneutic approach to religion. Then, like, so that, like, if in that respect, if you say, like, if someone was to take a fundamentalist Christian view or a fundamentalist theistic view, I'd say that, like, that's highly improbable. I'd in fact say they were wrong. Like, I wouldn't even say they were improbable. I would say they are actually wrong. Now, if you were to say that, let's say, like, I don't know, like you say omnibenevolence, omnipotence, these qualities which are attributable to God, I'd say that the qualities themselves are universals. It's not like, it's like you're predicating an infinite of an infinite. I'm not sure what my stance would necessarily be on the predicate, because I think it's kind of not an empty signifier, but I think the signification is outside of the being itself. If you understand, like, it's predicable of something outside of the being itself. In saying something is omnipowerful, omnipotent, you're saying that it has a relationship which can actualize any and all possibility. Now, and since what's possible is separate from what is necessary, it's not predicable of itself. Do you see what I'm saying? So when they say, like they're not descriptions. I wouldn't necessarily describe them as descriptions of the thing. If they were saying that these are descriptions of the thing, I will say you're right. If that makes it easier. If they're saying God is, and then X, Y, Z, then yeah, you're right. They're wrong. If they are instead predicates of our relationship with God, and they're actually descriptions of or allegorical, like not even allegorical, but let's say descriptions of divine action, then they aren't necessarily wrong. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure, I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about the relationship with God thing. I'm not sure where I stand on that, but it sounds like we agree on the content of the proposition as described, or like as I intended it. We agree that, like, when you say something like God is omnibenevolent, God is omniscient, God has all these properties, there's this being out there that has all these attributes. The existence of that being is highly improbable, and it sounds like we agree on that.
No.
And the only disagreement we have is about what things we should call God, and
No.
I don't really care to talk about it.
What the proposition was, really, if I find it, let's see first.
A Christian God is almost certainly non-existent.
A Christian God is certainly almost non-existent. The definition I gave you was a Christian definition, one of the largest ones. You said yourself that you couldn't say that it was necessarily non-existent. What you then described was what I would consider to be maybe a particular Christian definition, or which I think is fair to say that is less likely to be true. And then,
Mhm.
but that depends on whether they, again, actually attribute those things to God or really mean them in either an allegorical way or as a description of God's relationship with us. So even if those Christians mean something from which you've interpreted wrongly, then I would say that your argument doesn't follow. If they do mean what you've said, then yes, your argument follows. But that's for
Right,
a
exactly.
particular.
So
But that's
my
for a
proposition is
particular.
true of the thing I'm talking about.
So
And you
you're,
understand what I'm talking about. You agree
yeah,
with
I
me
mean, like,
that it
yeah,
follows of that. I agree that it does not follow of the thing that you're talking about. And the only way to resolve between us, who is correct on the proposition, would be if we somehow resolved our semantic disagreement here. But I think it's totally irrelevant. I think it's fine to just say, we'll just leave it to a vote. It's fine. We
yeah.
agree
I mean, I'm
on
happy to say
the
like,
content. We could have a separate debate maybe about what we should call God. But yeah, I'm not really concerned with that right now.
yeah. I mean, like, I guess what I would say is, like, in terms of the proposition, the only thing I would say is that, I guess the reason I would say that, like, why I would say that, like, when we say, like, when you say Christian God, I would say that it would be in the future, in case you ever come up against someone who's as pedantic, semantic, and absolutely annoying as me, just be very specific in the prop that you mean a particular engagement or notion of a Christian God rather than a Christian God.
Well,
It's
the
a very
Christian God, yeah,
broad,
exactly.
yeah. It's a very broad,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's obviously like a million different conceptions of it. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, so the reason, like, just as kind of a closing statement, because I think now, given that we both agree on the substance, the only like the thing that I could pose as a closing statement is essentially just my brief argument for why I think my like interpretation of the term the Christian God is better than yours. So I would just say like I think that my description of the Christian God as being this particular being that exists perhaps outside of reality or within it or something that is omnipresent and omnibenevolent and created the universe and is omnipotent and so on and so forth. I think this is a closer representation of what people mean when they say God in general. Like if we took like the average person, I would say that if we took the average of people who know what they're talking about Christianity, it would probably not be the consensus definition. I think that what you're describing would be a lot closer if you were in a theological circles or talking to anybody who's read Aquinas or any of this. But yeah, I think when we're describing like what do most people mean by Christianity and the Christian God, I think that my kind of definition is a lot closer. There you go.
Yeah. I just say like I do appreciate your argument. I can see where you're coming from. And I think that in many ways that might be it very well would be an argument against a very that kind of defined God where he has attributable qualities from which an individual could know or not know. I guess what I would add is that the average everyday Christian, I would say, definitely does engage with God in this way, whether they know it or not, through their churches, through their institutions, which are, have had a great intellectual discourse under their foundations. I mean, maybe not some of the American ones, especially like some of those where I watched someone try to tell like the other day about COVID vaccines and how they're not going to play these Democrat games in these churches and shit. So churches in like, especially like certain like very like weird sects, yeah, like okay, that foundation is by a bunch of idiots and even cultists sometimes. But like some of the organizations I was mentioning were like the Catholic Church, like the Church of England, like these churches have, and I mean like depending on the even like Protestant churches, as well, which I'm not as familiar with, but they would all have similar conceptions of God, from which they would structure their rituals and their teachings, from which the individuals then adhere to, whether they have as developed the knowledge or not. Now, that would mean that individuals, when they talk about them, may, accidentally or wrongly describe their beliefs or like their understanding. They may be wrong about what the teachings were, for one, but they also may attribute things accidentally and use poor language rather than actually describe what they mean, which is why I think when you do press Christians, a lot of the time they just go like, I don't know, God's perfect, or God is love, or God is everything, he's perfect, and they describe them in these infinites. And when they do give a description, they do go, he's omnipotent, he's omnibenevolent, and they're describing a relationship to creation and the act of creation, very much in particular. So yeah, I think that the average Christian does engage with the definition that I've gave. I think the average Christian may be unaware of the scholasticism and the debate that underpins it, but I don't think that is overall relevant to whether we can have certainty, that whether we can be absolutely certain a Christian God exists or not. Since if the Christian God is what Christians believe in and what Christians are discussing and going to church about and engaging with, then the Christian God of the Catholic Church is certainly not almost certain not to exist, or the Christian God of most of these churches which have a deep scholastic or deep academic foundation. So yeah, I think that your argument does work on a particular Christian God, or a particular conception of a Christian God, which would probably be fundamental and literal rather than allegorical and enlightened. So yeah, thank you for the debate though.
Sure. One closing bet, just because there was something in there that I didn't agree with. It's I just want to make clear that like my interpretation of these things isn't like, it's not about being literal or whatever. There are many different possible metaphorical interpretations of scripture, or of what any given Christian says about God. But I do believe that they actually, when you get down to like what they actually mean, the content of the message, regardless of whether or not it's encased in a sort of a message that is literal or metaphorical or whatever, I believe that the content is in most people's minds is as I've described. So my argument is not dependent upon any literal interpretation. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for debating as always, guys. I really appreciate it. And I'll post the voting poll in the debate chat channel. The only people who are not eligible to vote are Tripping Lettuce, Bob, and Jishu. If you guys could refrain from voting, I'd appreciate it. And if everyone else could vote, I'd also appreciate it. Perspective, I know you have a stream going, so if you want to bounce and kind of hang out with your stream and do your own thing, that's cool. But if you want, we can do a Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer a couple of questions since you've been nice enough to host. So
awesome. I appreciate it. So if anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring you up here, or you can put it in debate chat and I'll read it out. So first off, it looks like we have Carl Dan. Just try to keep it brief, guys. We don't want to have like a whole other debate or discussion on here. Just try to keep your question relatively short and hear the response. And if you have like a short counter response, then go for it. All right, Carl, I sent you an invite.
Awesome. Great debate. Liked it. I won't vote because I'm biased, and I'll try to keep it short. I just wanted to ask your perspective. First of all, I'm excited for your debate with Infrared. And I wanted to ask if you could further elaborate maybe on your position on Hegel and his conception of God, given that it is sort of considered different and almost heretical, I think, in certain traditions, relating to Aquinas, for example, or Paul.
I was actually just thinking about this and trying to think of a Hegelian notion of atonement, even because Hegel talks a lot about religion and what religion actually is, and he sees it as engagement with a universal, right? Like he very much does. I think there's a quote, I can't remember what it is actually now, about what we find in religion, and really it's like it is the abstract universal. It's the essentially, I would say, in many ways it seems to be the goal or the end of the ethic. You know what I mean? It's something which is sort of transcendent, which is moving us forwards, which is why I think he would say something like, he says something like, there can be no true revolution without revelation. Like the notion of the divine in this notion of divinity is an ever-growing concept. And if we truly have political change or truly ethical change within the individuals within our society, then they will conceive of a divine in a different way. They will have a revelation over what God is. And so, like, our relationship with God is one which is, or universal is I would say quite humanist. I think a humanist understanding of Hegel, like we are actually. God is a universal standard from which we are judging ourselves and trying to become, rather than literal. But then some people do say that he's a Protestant just through and through, and he's just like arguing for the existence of a God, and that he's actually talking about a God when he talks about like absolute spirit, in terms of it's absolute ethical spirit. So. Yeah, I'd say that like it depends on what there is that issue. Like it depends on how you read Hegel. I'd say in my understanding of Hegel, our relationship with God would be a relationship with an abstract universal, which is constantly growing and developing in relation to the ever developing notion of logos, or like logic, which is underpinning everything, and its relationship to our understanding of existence itself. So it is like God would be. Either I would say in this respect, we are God, and a humanist interpretation would probably be the best way to understand it, in the sense that we are the middle term in the existence of spirit. So if, like he says that like substance is split through action, the middle term that exists is self-consciousness. So we have consciousness as the first term, self-consciousness as the infinite middle term, and then obviously absolute spirit as the conclusion. The absolute spirit in this would be the reconciliation of consciousness and self-consciousness in a perfect, complete way, which is, I think, really existence understanding itself, which would be God, or at least a state of godliness, and which I would say would be either what we are aiming towards or what Hegel's conception of God would be.
Awesome, thank you. That answered it better than I could have asked for. I appreciate that. And yeah, I more clearly see where you sit on the view of Hegel's God. So yeah, thank you. Excited for your debate again on Fred. I also wanted to ask, maybe one day you could look into debating a guy named Detroyer. I think that would be a really interesting debate. Maybe Stone could set it up or something. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Happy to, as soon as it's like good faith and all that,
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for the question, man. And we just have a few more text questions. So Boy Got Ideas has a question for both of you, and I'll paste these in debate chat as we go, just so you have it in front of you, so it's a little easier. So he asks, have you all heard of ontological math? It claims to have an equation for God in the same way there's an equation for gravity. And that's to both of you.
I mean, I haven't. I mean, I've heard of like realism in math. So that's kind of like universals, like realism in terms of universals. But I've never heard of ontological realism in math, and I certainly haven't heard of a mathematical proof of God.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about it. Just looking it up on the old Wikipedia, seems like some number mysticism shit, but maybe not. I don't know.
Gotcha. And we have a question from Tomato for you, Perspective. He asks...
Tomato.
Yeah, good old Tomato. But he asks, are you also agnostic towards polytheistic religions, or just the Christian God?
Just the Christian God. Polytheistic religions are shit. Yeah, usually, yeah. But yeah, there we go. No, I mean, like the Christian God in the Abrahamic sense, like in the sense, like I mean, like it would be like the Muslim God. It would also be like the Jewish God. It would be any God that fits that kind of like definition. It wouldn't be just like the Christian God, unless they start like it was like a religion that was actually attributing like features to, like predicates to God, like essentially. But yeah, that's I think polytheistic religions are usually kind of shit. Like I'm not gonna lie, like I don't see a reason why we should believe in, let's say, like Zeus or something necessarily.
Gotcha. Nice one. And the last one we have is for Asgrod. This is from Ellie. Post that in debate chat. They ask, what is your criteria for evaluating God's existence? What sort of evidence are you looking for? I'm pretty sure this was mentioned, but I did not hear it.
So for me, like to determine like the evidence for something that we didn't really talk about because perspective basically like I said, like you can't get evidence for God, so we just kind of like dispense with that. But in general, like to get evidence for something, you just have to see like some kind of observation that's more likely if the thing it may or may not be evidence for is true. So like if you, for example, you see some person having committed murder with poison or something, you would say, okay, this is evidence for a woman murderer because you're more likely to see poison if you if the murderer is a woman. So it's like seeing that the murder weapon was poison is evidence for it being a woman. So in the case of God, you'd just be like, well, is there anything that we observe that's more likely if God is real than if we don't assume that God's real? And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is like, just the existence of the earth is a lot more probable if God is real. There's a lot of things which are more likely if we assume that God's real. So those are all evidence of God. Now there's other questions about whether and how strong that evidence is, but they are all evidence.
Awesome. Did you want to add something to that perspective? I thought I might have heard you speak up.
No, I was I'd muted myself. I was actually chewing, so it's cool.
Well, I guess that is kind of adding something, but cool, awesome. And it looks like that's the last question we have. So I want to thank you both for coming on and debating, as always. Really appreciate you doing so. And if you guys are all set, I'm all set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks again. It's very much appreciated, and thank you. Was it Azarod? Asgarod. Well, thank you very much, Asgarod. I do appreciate it, and thank you very much, Stone, for moderating. Also, just to let everyone know who's watching, you can check out. You can get more debates like this on Arthuria. Great debate server. Check them out. I tried linking the server. Actually, it's worth mentioning. Wouldn't work. So if you could just drop us a link to the server that I can put in the description, Storm, that would be great. Just in like an invite, because I tried doing it and it wouldn't work for whatever reason. But thanks guys.
Yeah, gotcha. And I'll send you that link. That's weird because people have actually been mentioning they've been having issues making invite links. So it must be like a Discord thing. But yeah, I really appreciate it, Perspective and Asgrod. Take it easy, all right?
Take it easy, guys.
Peace.
Okay. Oh. Right, radio. Right. Oh, you linked it. I'll one second. I'll just pin that. Thanks very much, Twisted. It's appreciated. I'll see if when Stone links his one. Like, actually, I could probably just use that. Could I just copy that link, couldn't I? Copy link address and edit the video. Right. So, if anyone has any questions or comments, just hit us up in the chat. If you want to get your question answered sooner, then you can. You can donate. I do read chat. You were ready to expose infrared for his lack of Hegelian knowledge. Well, like, look, I don't want it to be like, I know Hegel better than you. I actually want to talk about veganism. But, like, I have a feeling that the guy doesn't understand Hegel at all. I do have the feeling that. I have a feeling a lot of projection on his part, actually. So, it's kind of weird. He goes and he says that, like, I'm a fake Hegelian. But then, like, it sounds like, I haven't watched it yet, but in his Ask Yourself debate, apparently his use of Hegel is bad and underdeveloped. So it sounds like he hasn't read Hegel. Then he said, like, I'm scared and I'm dodging the debate. But he said that as he wasn't replying to my messages about organizing the debate. Then he said that I'm trying to dodge the debate by not wanting to debate until midnight, right? I've been actually trying to sort my sleeping pattern out. So I've been trying to like for example, I was awake for like 20 something hours yesterday, because I'm trying to live a normal life, right? Like that's the goal anyway. That's the idea. So you're saying I've got a bedtime. It's like I hadn't slept actually. I was like kind of went to bed like fucking next day, but so I don't even have a bed. What is time anyway? The thing is that like so then he says like I'm trying to avoid him because I didn't want to debate him until like 10 to midnight, or like after midnight, which is like I think reasonable. I think asking someone to to intellectually engage at like an early hour, like a really late hour rather, or like early morning, is a bit ridiculous. I think it's a bit unfair, especially since it's just to like kind of coincide with his time. I was trying to get him to debate at like 12 p.m. his time, right? And he was like, no, absolutely not. Like, he wouldn't move from like 4 p.m. And so I managed to get him to like 3 p.m., which is 8 p.m. my time. So like that we're both awake and capable for debating, right? And I think that's fair enough. I'm asking him to wake up a little bit earlier, but it's still in the afternoon, right? And he's like, now he's saying that he mightn't even be able to do the debate because he'd have to wake up at 3 p.m. Or whatever. And so he might genuinely have to cancel. So he says, I'm dodging the debate by not debating at midnight or like because of time. But he's saying that he might cancel the debate because he can't get up an hour sooner. Like, I don't know. Like, the guy is... I get the feeling that he's genuinely projecting. Like, he's I think the thing is, I think he knows he's full of shit. I think he knows he's not going to debate anything. I think he's just going to sling some shit at us and hope it sticks. And then, you know, like, just go like, oh, well, you fucking idiot, you're a fake Hegelian. He just slang shit at us and then eventually, you know, claim victory and toddle off. Yeah, I think I would have ignored infrared, like I would have, but then I had so many people asking us to debate him. It's you guys. You're the reason I'm debating infrared. I was willing to just go, actually, I think this guy's a dick, because he was like, I'm going to debate you from a butcher. I'm going to debate you from like, and it's like, all right, so you're trying to like make us not debate you then. Like, you're trying to like, don't debate me because I'll do something like a dickhead thing. It's like, I just don't think he wants to debate us. I think he realizes that he couldn't debate us. I think he realizes it's beyond his capabilities to argue philosophy with us. I don't think he understands it enough. I think that he relies upon Hegel and people's misunderstandings of Hegel so that he can go, oh, I'm a Hegelian, so none of this applies. Because they've never read Hegel, and Hegel's hard to read. Well, talking to a Hegelian, you can't do that. So, like, I don't know. I think that like I'm debating him against my better judgment because of the desire of my audience. Thank you very much, guys. And yeah, it's probably gonna be a shit show. I don't know. It sounded like you almost converted him from atheism. Well, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think it was that. I don't think he's come away with that amount of revelation. Like, oh my god, I see it now. Why do you need to know Hegel to debate veganism? It's more of the fact that Hegel's like, I'm a Hegelian in terms of ethics, and he's a Hegelian in terms of ethics. So you need to know Hegel to really debate ethics a little bit on those grounds. I think like knowing Hegel's really good for ethics anyway. But Yeah. He said something like about. He said some really stupid shit actually. Like, what did he say? He said Hegel's not a deontologist. That was a good one. It's like, well, yes, he is. But whatever. Like, Hegel's not a fucking. All right, okay. Glad I found that out. Actually, really great essay on that is Dean Moyer's deontology and consequentialism in Hegel's philosophy of right. Maybe saying that he was not purely a deontologist would be true, but saying that he's not a deontologist is just fucking wrong. If anything, he's more of a deontologist than he is a consequentialist. Do I expect the debate with Infrared to be in good faith? I'll be in good faith. I can't comment on what... I don't expect him to be in good faith, if I'm honest. I'd very much doubt it, but we'll see. Oh, yeah. I think... well, Eastern Christianity, maybe. I don't know, Magnus. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about Eastern Christianity to actually comment on that. Really. But I think Hegel was influenced by even Eastern philosophy in general, like as in maybe even influenced by a little bit of Hinduism. It's very possible. I think that I was even thinking that there seems to be almost like a Catholic almost influence there. Because it's very much about dialectic and engagement, not just one's own like attribute, like a lot of the thinkers used to believe in terms of like reason and scripture. Reason itself is communal in Hegel, so like to say reason and scripture in like an individualist sense, I think, or an individualistic sense, would be wrong for Hegel. Time is what clocks make. You said that there is no ontological difference between the Christian God and the Jewish Islamic God, but there is. Christians are usually Trinitarian and the latter are Unitarian. True, actually, the Trinitarian-Unitarian debate, like a difference. But then, like, they are... The Trinitarian God is one God. It's complex, but they're not three gods. Which is why... What's he called? I can't remember his fucking name. The one that came up with nominalism got accused of tritheism. He got charged with tritheism. He's like, you believe everything's particulars and not universals, then you must argue that God is itself three separate gods rather than like actually one unified God. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't think that it's a massive I don't think it's a metaphysical difference though. I think the Trinitarian God I think the Trinitarian God is the same essence, or would be described would be the same essence as a Unitarian God. Infrared doesn't make much sense, so I wouldn't expect him to logically follow. I don't know. I haven't seen him that many debates. I was going to review the Ask Yourself debate with him and Ask Yourself, which I think should be fun. Does Infrared work at night or something? I don't know. I have no idea. I think he mentioned something about being an insomniac. Which is like, he's like, I don't know if I'm going to do it. I have insomnia. It's like, I don't know, man. The guy's such a fucking hypocrite. It's like I don't want to debate at an unreasonable hour. All right. Well, I don't want to debate when I'm an insomniac. Well, that'd be fair enough. Like, if you say like something like you have a condition, I would normally be sympathetic if he wasn't such a dick. I'd be like, all right, well, that's all right. Well, we'll see if I can be more amenable then. But since he's not willing to be amenable with me at all, it's like, well, what the fuck? Like, can something be metaphysical or not, be intuitable but not fully known? The only incredibly sadistic and ironic, most accurate definition tribute to this salient discussion would be to have the following. Oh my god! Right? Okay. I don't even know how to respond to that, Loch Ness. But yes. Crap on the chessboard and then tell his friends he won. Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. I think this, he's going. I don't know, man. You know he's going to yell at us. That's just the crack. I don't even care about him yelling. Like, he can do what he wants. Like, if he wants to be like that, I can't moderate his own behavior. The Prime K's blood panels, I can check them out. I only got on one Prime K's panel. I haven't really been on since. But it's like stupid o'clock in the morning again for us. Like, I really kind of regret it. It wasn't worth staying, like, no offense to the panel, right? But it wasn't worth staying up till like 5, 6 a.m. for that. It was just like, God, just let me go to bed. I was expecting to stay up till like 2 a.m. And then I ended up staying up like 4, 5 a.m. or something. I was like, oh my God. Even 2 a.m. I was like, fuck, I'm pushing it. Yeah, alright, okay, I'll do it. And then I was just like, my God. Yeah, Hegel isn't a debate cheat code. I agree, but I think that's what he's using them for. Hegel, by the way, I win. Absolutely, that's absolute spirit. All modern day sex and gender politics, a clear break from those of history, is gayness, for instance, a modern construct different from and usefulness to describe ancient Rome. No, I think that I would disagree. I would say actually the concepts that we talk about in gender are very much historically defined and sex. They would have manifested themselves in judgment in different ways. They wouldn't hold all of the same attributable qualities and attributes. They wouldn't have been understood the same. But they would. But for example, the gender performativity, biological differences between men and women, and how they affected people's judgments. 100% definitely useful for understanding ancient Rome and how, for example, the role of women in ancient Rome is an interesting topic. You know. Women being like kind of second-class citizens, but also having great political influence at times, and how that is comparable to women throughout history and how things have changed, how the gender performance has changed, and how the norms and expectations have changed. I think that these things are not a clear break, but rather a dialectical development. What a surprise! So I hope that answers that question. Magnus. He did actually, the guy just debated, he really doubled down on the particulars of certain Christians and let go of his probability formula altogether. His closing statements made it seem like he now thinks there is evidence for a God everywhere in a sense. Well, maybe, John Joe, maybe. Maybe I've just converted someone. Have I seen the Majesty of Reason's content? Not really. I've seen him talk to Alex O'Connor, and I think he was on Capturing Christianity talking to Rationality Rules as well. I definitely talked to the guy though. Seems like a really intelligent guy, really well read. Probably much more better read than me on theology. Theology's my weakest. I'd say definitely my weakest philosophical field. I'd say like ethics is my strongest. Then maybe I think probably ethics, metaphysics, epistemology in that order. I think Schopenhauer was definitely influenced by Eastern religion, 100%. I don't know Schopenhauer nearly enough to nearly enough in general. I need to read the man's work more. Like, I've only read parts of his work. I've never really engaged with Schopenhauer in a way in that I would say that I knew him. I'm acquainted with Schopenhauer. Time is invented by as an illusion from capitalist society clocks. I've seen that meme, man. That's good. Infrared will be in good faith, but he isn't the brightest. I'm seeing that what he'll say, what he thinks you're saying will likely be wobbly. You may see it as bad face, but I think it's more of him being dull and not understanding ignorance as being a bliss of sort of thing. Well, maybe. I don't think he's as stupid as he lets on, like as he maybe behaves, like. But I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him. Triune. I don't know what you're saying there. I don't know if that's from me. What do you think about agnosticism being a statement about knowing/certainty rather than belief? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I think that agnosticism is a point about knowing/certainty rather than belief. Like, so I'm an agnostic. Even if you believe in God, but you don't know that God exists, you don't claim that God does exist, but you believe in God, I would say that would be an agnostic take. If you say that God does exist, and this is why, then that would be a theistic take. Like, if God doesn't exist, and this is why, that would be an atheistic take. And that's usually the academic circles that talk about it like that. Have I ever heard of ego death from psychedelics? I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. Most base take is being an atheist Christian. Well, I mean, like I think, like, in terms of, like, it makes sense to talk about, like, the historical, like, tradition from which your concepts have arisen. But I think just seeing it as just Christian as perhaps, or Judeo-Christian through and through, excuse me, as Jordan Peterson likes to say, is perhaps a little bit narrow. I think that the traditions which impact us in terms of rationality are more than just Christianity or Islam or so on. There are a multitude of different ideological and fundamental influences upon our thinking. Yeah. Trinitarianism is just a way to create a more approachable and conceivable way of the proxy of God's will beyond the Ten Commandments, which Jesus acts as a role model and just a theological. I agree. I think so. And also, it's a way of linking, it's a way of connecting God to us and unifying God with us in terms of not only just a relationship, but in terms of, our unity within existence. And it also is allegorical and metaphorical about God's love and, what God would be willing to do for us, and like how, what it means to be divine is like metaphorically encapsulated, I think, very well in Trinitarianism. I actually quite like Trinitarianism, to be entirely honest with you. Yeah. Science is fake. God, let me go to bed. PP theist confirmed. Absolutely. What are my thoughts on effective altruism? I mean, I think that I disagree with Singer's take on normative ethics, if I'm honest. But I think that he makes some good points about how, mostly about like the ways in which we don't consider the ethical consequences of our actions, or maybe the fact that we're maybe limited by our own biases. But I think that this is encapsulated in duty and not necessarily by, his solutions. Is that actually infrared? I never said I had a 9 p.m. bedtime, you dick. I said that I wasn't going to debate you till midnight. Why don't you wake up before fucking 4 p.m., you lazy fuck? fucking, oh, I want you to debate till midnight. Oh, by the way, I won't get up before 4 p.m. I am streaming right now. That is really well observed. I'm very proud of you. Oh, maybe this debate will be more effective. You can see the obvious. That's more than I thought he was capable of. Are people justified in theistic belief in lieu of experience entirely consisting in the form of sense divinicus? But I don't know, man. Swinburne, I think, is it Swinburne? Shit, is it Swinburne? Who argues that like that religious experience is a valid form of evidence. I would say in terms of belief, it's a valid motivator to belief, but I don't think anything is. In terms of evidence or justification, no. Because I mean, like, you can have like a religious like belief that would be that like you've got to be able to differentiate between false and real religious belief experiences, right? So there needs to be some sort of like standard again to judge, and that's going to be, you know, contingent. Who's my favorite theistic philosopher? My favorite atheistic philosopher? I think my favorite theistic philosopher, I don't know, man. Like Hegel, if you count him as theistic. Because I mean, like, he does talk a lot about religion and thinks it's important, so I probably would count him as theistic. Probably a humanist though. My favorite theistic philosopher in terms of like theology is probably someone like Aquinas. I think Aquinas is quite interesting. And my favorite atheist philosopher would probably be, I don't know, probably be like Anthony Flew. Infrared, stop being I want you to change your sleep. You want me, like, I'm trying to change my sleep schedule so that I can live a normal fucking life and live on normal fucking hours, right? So I said I wouldn't debate you at like the end of the day at midnight, right? I think that's like fair. I think asking someone to debate at the end of a working day, like the very end, not even the end of a working day, at a point which is unreasonable hours to work at, like proper antisocial hours. Like, yeah, I think that's unreasonable. I think asking you to wake up for 3 p.m. is not unreasonable. Wake yourself up. Like, fuck. Like I don't know how you can manage to turn that and twist that around. Like, waking up at 3 p.m. is unreasonable, but debating at 12 a.m. isn't. Like, grow the fuck up. I'm going to relay him. You're proper ducking from the debate. I knew that you'd fucking do this, you absolute pussy. Like, proper projecting. Oh, like, I'm not gonna get up early because you know, I can't do it, and I definitely mightn't do the debate, and oh, he's dodging me. Even though I said I'd debate you early in the morning, I said I'd debate you like 7 a.m. Or I said I'd debate you at like fairly late at night. I just said I wouldn't debate you late as fuck. And then, even though I'm being reasonable as fuck, I managed to. I was amenable as fuck with the hours. I originally said like I give you like maybe like a 8-hour, 9-hour window. I mean that like a 12, 13-hour window in which you could debate us in. No, none of that's good enough. No, it has to be those fucking times that you picked. You unreasonable bastard. Like, absolute narcissistic control freak. Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. I said that he was like, "Oh, my audience don't see me debate at like 3 p.m. I usually debate at 5 p.m. or like 4 or 5 p.m. I've never debated so early." Like, so it's like, right. But I said I would debate at 7 a.m. Who's gonna be there? Like, it's not that, like, I'm not doing it all like, oh, well, my audience isn't gonna be there and it's not gonna fit my schedule, therefore I won't do it. It's like, no, it's like, I could record it and upload it later if it's that much of a big deal. Like, if it's really that much of a big deal. And if it's something that's, let's say, like, even if it means I won't get the best views and I simply do it, and I'm making a concession for the fact that I know that the other person has an audience on a very different time scale, then that's just the way it works, right? That's just the way it works, man. I didn't intentionally lie. You yourself were the least amenable person ever. I give you like 13 hours or something of a time frame. You didn't manage to even find a time in that. You're like, no, I won't get up before 4 p.m. I told President Sunday to tell you to wake up and that you're a lazy fuck. Like I think that debating at 12 a.m. versus debating at 3 p.m. is a very big difference. And I think that's tangible. I'm trying to sort my life out so I can live a normal fucking human existence, whilst you are trying to fit your desires in exactly what you want, not willing to give any ground or any leeway. It's absolutely narcissistic, self-absorbed. It's pathetic. And you know what the worst thing is? You are 100% trying to dodge, because I even sent you a message before you went on Destiny. You go and start saying that I'm trying to avoid you, but you're not replying to my messages. You start saying that I'm a fake Hegelian, but your conversations with other people have shown that you don't really understand Hegel and you have at best a second-hand knowledge of him. You start saying that I'm trying to dodge you from time frames, and now you're looking to cancel an arranged debate because you don't want to wake up for 3 p.m. You're absolutely trying to dodge it. You're an absolute pussy. You don't understand Hegel, and you really don't understand ethics. I think you're a bit of a monkey, and you need to grow up. I did send you messages. Check your Discord. I'm not going to be sleeping tonight at all. I'm going to be staying awake until, I think the plan is to stay awake. It was either to go to bed like now, and try and wake up, or earlier, or either stay awake 24 hours. I've been trying to fix my sleeping pattern. My old account that got hacked and disabled. You got hacked and disabled like within a week. Because I was talking to you. When was I talking to you? Look, like if infrared show. You were sending me messages back on the 6th of the 25th, on the 25th of the 6th, 21. Right? So that's what, like, shit, that's like the 25th of June. Right? You're trying to say that you got hacked in that time. Because I sent you a message on the 7th, on the 30th of the 7th, saying, so people keep asking us to debate you. Are you capable of good faith debate? Like, you know, trying to organize things. You never got back, and then you go and talk about us on Destiny. July 30th, my account was disabled. The actual day, was it disabled the day, or was it? If it was disabled, I don't know that. Look, I couldn't have known that. So I messaged you. I wasn't trying to dodge the debate. I don't know if it was disabled or not. If that's so, that's really sad, but I wasn't trying to dodge it. Look, I don't really care if the account's there or not, if you've changed your account. Like, you accused me of avoiding the debate. I messaged you. You didn't message me again and go, oh, like, me account's disabled or something, or like, just letting you know, like, me account got hacked. If you want to contact us here. You just said, oh, well, he's not gotten back to us. Well, it's like, well, I would have replied to the account in which I was talking to, which I assumed was you. I don't, like, keep up with your day-to-day affairs. Because I'm trying to sort my life out, infrared. That's why. And I don't think that it's. I don't think like what. Look. Like look at it like this, right? You said you debate me 2 weeks later. As far as 3 weeks later, you said you no longer wanted to debate. I was saying to my audience, I don't think it's worth debating. And then I got back to you. Like, to be fair, I did say that I don't think it's worth debating you, which I'm kind of convinced that's probably true. Like, I don't know if you're going to be legit, if you're capable of good faith debate. I don't know if you're willing to be reasonable in this. I mean, shit, you said that you were going to talk to us from a butcher shop, that you were going to like eat a burger on stream. So what reason I have to debate you is like negligible, right? Like I'm thinking, wow, what a bad faith actor. And then I still messaged you saying, so people keep asking us to debate you. You say that you didn't get this. Fair enough. I said, so people keep asking us to debate you. Are you legit capable of good faith debate? Like no bullshit screaming, eating burgers, or that stupid shit show kind of stuff, right? Which I'm unconvinced that you are or not capable of. Like I don't know if you are. But I said I'd do it anyway because President Sunday was like, well, I'll host. And he's like, I'll host it, I'll moderate, I'll, make sure it's like, copacetic. So I was like, you know what? All right, fair enough. President Sunday wants to do that. He's a critic of mine, so there's no real reason of bias. Fair enough. And so we scheduled the debate. Scheduling the debate was then another issue because you're like, it's going to have to be like 5 p.m. my time. And I was like, well, that's like kind of ridiculous. That's like for example, I'm going off in a second, right? So if we were having a debate, I wasn't even planning on staying on this late. If we were having a debate, I've got to be like consciously like capable, like have not stayed awake 24 hours or stayed awake like a stupid amount of time, had like an adequate amount of sleep, and like be able to engage in debate. And I was confident at that time with where my sleeping pattern was going to be, I wouldn't be. Pretty sure I probably wouldn't be now either. It'd be like the end of the day for me. So I'm like, well, no, I'm not going to debate you at the very end of me day. I'll debate you like at a reasonable hour. And then when I ask you to go an hour or so earlier than when you normally would, you're acting as if it's such a big deal. I think that's such... Sleep deprivation is way worse for cognitive function as opposed to staying up for a few hours late. Well, considering that it would... One, like, considering that it's about me sleeping pattern and sleep deprivation, like, one, I don't know the empirics of that. I don't really give a fuck. Like, I'm asking you to wake up an hour sooner. It's not like I'm giving you, like, full-on, like, sleep deprivation problems, man. They eat some pistachio nuts or something a couple of hours, like, before you're going to go to bed, and you'll get extra melatonin in your brain, and you have to go to sleep sooner. Like, I'm asking you to wake up an hour sooner. I mean, shit, like, why is your sleeping pattern 4 p.m. anyway? Like, Christ, like... I understand that you have a pattern, like, what was it? Like, I have a record of chronic insomnia. That's fair enough. Like, I understand. I said I would have been sympathetic to you if you weren't such a dick. If you weren't being, like, reasonable with me. I was like, okay, you wake up, like, an hour sooner. I was planning on staying, like, waking up at, like, 7 a.m. and stuff. So I even offered, like, early morning. I offered, like, later than I normally would. I even went later than I said I would. So, like, I've been nothing but amenable this whole time. I just wasn't exactly what you wanted. And you're like, oh, wow, what a dick. So unreasonable. Yeah, sorry guys. I won't look, man, look, you can look, you said that you would debate us at 3 p.m. You can either back out of that, and that's your choice. If you wanna dodge that debate, that's on you, right? That's absolutely on you. If not, I'll see you Saturday. I said I would. I'll be there. Oh no, don't worry, it's still happening. Great. I look forward to it. Oh, I'm just gonna prove that you're a lying coward. Like, lying about what? What have I lied about? Yeah. Nah. Oh, I'm coming off now. Absolutely, you just the thing is, it's such well poisoning. That's the thing. Like, you're trying to make you say that I'm scared of the debate, but I'm not the one that has to go and tell. Or I'm not the one that has to go into your audience or tell to my audience exactly what you are, because my audience come to me and go, "This guy's a bit of an idiot." Favorite pieces of literature. Do you mean like if you mean like fiction, or like non-fiction? So if like fiction, I would probably say like I really enjoyed like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sleep, and in terms of non-fiction, I would probably say, well, I've depends on like what kind of experience you're looking from it. I never claimed to have a 9 p.m. bedtime. I never said you'd back out. I'm just gonna say, like, I never thought that anyone would be so unreasonable for waking up at 3 p.m. So no, I definitely didn't think you were gonna back out. I asked you to debate in the afternoon. I mean, Christ, I don't care if you've got insomnia at this point. Like, there is like livable hours that normal humans function at, and if you can't function at those hours, I've made reasonable adjustments. If you're so disabled that my reasonable adjustments are not able to accommodate you, I'm very sorry. You're very unique. It's not something I can accommodate. Define reasonable, define reasonable in relation to the streaming profession, which is not a normal job. Well, it's like true. I'm not doing just a normal job, but I have other responsibilities in my life. Like, I'm a full-time student. I'm trying to do other work. I have other things. I have relationships and commitments. Like, for right now, like, my girlfriend wants to go and do shit. I promised her I'd go and do shit, and I'm here arguing with you anyway. Yeah, he's just trying to find an out for the debate. He's like, oh, well, like, you don't want to debate on my time, so I guess I can just get out of it. Yeah, well, I'm gonna bounce in anyways, guys. It's been a good stream. I'm a terrible philosopher, of course. Idea insults. Alright, well, anyway, guys, take it easy. I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you'd like to give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. And as always, try to gain some perspective.